Good morning to everybody. Looking forward to having an amazing conversation, really talking about what new financing mechanisms we're bringing to scaling climate, smart technologies, and particularly across the emerging markets. So I would love to take a quick moment to allow our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right in. So I'll start with you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Courtney. So I'm Jonathan Berman. I'm the CEO of the Shell Foundation. The Shell Foundation is an independent philanthropy founded with an endowment from the Shell Group 25 years ago. And our mission is to raise incomes while lowering emissions on a commercial basis. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about that.
Amazing. Astria, good morning to you. Share a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, Courtney. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Astria Fataki. I am the strategic lead for Timbuktu. Timbuktu is a flagship initiative from UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme. And our objective through this program and platform that Timbuktu is to support startup and entrepreneurship across the entire African continent and to support up to 1,000 startups to reach scale by 2035 and to mobilize $1 billion to support this ecosystem grow over the 10 next years.
Incredible. I love the focus on startups, and I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about that. Marlene, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much for having us. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marlène Gueilly. I'm the CEO of FEDA. FEDA is a billion-dollar investment fund, the impact investment arm of Afrexim Bank, which is a large multilateral focusing on Africa. And what we do is equity, quasi-equity investments across many different sectors in Africa. And I'm excited to speak to you about what we do in e-mobility.
Amazing. Well, perhaps we'll start the conversation a little bit broadly and maybe observations in terms of what you're seeing right now across financing mechanisms, and in particular, how the Shell Foundation has really come to hone the mechanisms that you're deploying and investing in today.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, our organization believes that in order to lower emissions, you need to raise incomes for people, and it needs to be on a commercial basis so that you are also creating income for companies and for investors, right? So to that, and without that, the entire endeavor is not sustainable. So to that end, we've leveraged some $10 billion in capital since inception. We do that through deploying our capital through grant, debt, equity, and guarantees, and other forms of concessional finance. And that's the biggest. That's the first point that I would make, is that you might wonder what's the role of philanthropic capital in making returns, and from our perspective, a proper role of philanthropic capital is de-risking the pre-commercial, de-risking what's new in the marketplace. So new customers, new technologies such as involved in the green transition, new markets. Many of the investors that we work with are first time in emerging markets where we've been there 25 years. So for us, it makes sense to de-risk those early steps so that projects and products can eventually become commercially sustainable with no philanthropic support.
Yeah. And tell me, I mean, you've been doing this a long time and developed a real expertise. Have you seen these mechanisms or the funders or participants of the products that you all are using change over time?
Yeah, so I'll limit myself to the 3 years that I've been the CEO of the foundation. Even in that time, we've seen a change. So we've seen both large global corporates come into the space, as well as significant regional leaders. So in Africa or in South Asia, which is the two regions in which we're active, we now work with the largest agribusinesses, the largest distributors of generators in those regions, which are is a piece of critical infrastructure for almost every company. Now involved in blended finance structures, where they were new to that a few years ago. Even regional banks, which are key to creating the access to finance necessary, for example, for a farmer to buy a solar pump, or for the millions of people driving two-wheel vehicles to buy an electric vehicle for the first time. Those regional banks are also new to blended finance, and we're doing the first deals with them and leveraging our experience to walk those critical players through that process.
Amazing, amazing. And Astria yourself, I mean, Timbuktu is such a unique initiative, and UNDP has long been a player in all sorts of really critical needs and financing around the world. And what was it like to see the initiative formed, and how did you choose the way in which you were going to structure and finance the outcomes you were looking for?
Well, thank you for the question. So, UNDP stands for United Nations Development Program, but for me, the D stands for dignity and dignified life. And so this is one of the key mission of UNDP, and that's the reason why we wake up every day. It's to make sure that everything we do allow a maximum of person to live a dignified life. And so Timbuktu is actually a reform agenda because in the world we live in, the geopolitical situation that we are facing, development cannot be implemented the way it was done 60 years ago when UNDP was created. We really need to have a new way of proposing a way to dignified life, and entrepreneurship can be a very strong way to leverage, let's say, the positive side of capitalism towards this objective. And so Timbuktu has been really structured to be a platform because we operate in an ecosystem where the players are a little bit siloed and a little bit scattered. And even in terms of financing and de-risking financing, what we've realized is that sometimes the communication between the different players on the ecosystem is a bit limited. And so Timbuktu is really designed in the way to connect the different players across the continent so that we can really create a true African market. Because with the IFCTA, Africa is going to be the largest consolidated market in the world. So we really want to leverage that. And so in order to do so, we created 10 different hubs in different countries. Those hubs are thematic, so going from agri-tech to green tech to health tech, fintech, mining tech, so sectors that actually need to be boosted in terms of entrepreneurship and also financing, because those sectors, they are not the most glamorous one, if I can say so. For example, when we look at the funding in the startup ecosystem, fintech is still the first one to receive funding, and though it's necessary and services are necessary, especially when it comes to banking, it's hard to develop a continent without those really core and basic industrialization type of innovation. And so that's why we really invest in those space, and we invest in talent, because at the end of the day, Africa is one of the youngest continents on the planet, lots of talents, but those talents need to be cultivated further and structured into bankable projects, bankable startups that can actually grow. And so we are working closely with players like 500 Global, for example, to structure acceleration programs that can help doing so. And that's actually through this partnership that we also collaborate with the Shell Foundation to really nurture those talents towards investable startups.
Yes, yes. And actually, for our audience here and also watching online, could you just share a little bit about the significance of what's happened with the IFCTA? Because I think it's kind of under discussed, and what a bold and important move this is to be able to continue innovation and financing at scale on the continent.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we look at the innovation space and the entrepreneurial space in general, the bigger your market, the better somehow. And the truth is that so far the African market has been very compartmentalized, and I think for outside observer, Africa is this huge country, but really it isn't. It's a continent with 54 different countries. I'm sure everyone here have seen at least this map of Africa that actually contains many continents, Asia, Europe, all together. And so with the IFCTA, we are now in the phase where we are really integrating this market. That will very much be the European Union, let's say. of Africa. And this allows us, and that's why we have those hubs. Each of those hubs that I mentioned earlier, they are thematic, but they are Pan-African. So when we work with, let's say, an agri-tech startup, we are setting them up to scale across the continent. And so they can really, we have this soft landing approach. So it means that a startup that is like a Zambian startup that is working on a green tech technology in Nairobi has actually a place to land in, let's say, Dakar, if this market is relevant for them. So, and the fact that now through the FCTA, we have tax disposition that really allows funders to move across. We also have a lot of facilitation, business facilitation services. This makes it even more possible.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Marlene, I would love to hear a little bit more. Could you just share with the audience on the history, the development of FIDA, and then in particular the work you've done in infrastructure, because it's such a big component of climate financing at scale.
Thank you very much. So I say, so FEDA was actually was born out of Afrexim Bank, which is the second largest multilateral based in Cairo, but obviously serving all of Africa. We have a $45 billion balance sheet, started 30 years ago with 100 million. And at first, Afrexim Bank was focusing on trade finance, so very short-term solutions. Then the bank evolved into doing more medium-term financing and loans. And in 2019, they realized for the type of ambition that we have on the continent, and my co-panelists mentioned the AFCFTA, the Africa integration, more and more you have national businesses that want to go regional, that want to be Pan-African. For that, they realize you need capital, big capital, but you also need patient capital. So you cannot be ambitious and be pressed about repaying your loan or your interest expenses the next month. So there was a need for equity. And so when we calculated it, we realized that the continent was really underserved in terms of equity. Beyond just the patient capital, there was also a need for governance, having strong boards, having partners that can link you up to markets, that can link you up to customers, suppliers. So that need for equity and the governance that comes with it was very important. So Afrexim Bank was very ambitious, and they said, let's start FEDA. Let's have FEDA, and let's invest money off of our balance sheet. So to date, FEDA has invested, we're at $1.3 billion that we have invested in equity, quasi-equity. So that's a bold move. So that's a bank that has a 45 billion balance sheet, but wants to be transformational and saying, before we raise money from others, let's build a portfolio rather than asking people to invest based on our hope and dreams. Let's build a portfolio. Let's prove our thesis. And so we created the fund with three objectives. We want to industrialize Africa. We want to make sure that when Africa exports to the rest of the world, it does so with value add, so value add export development. We do not want to see the exports of raw commodity to the rest of the world. We want to create wealth in Africa, so we want people to have nice paying jobs. We want people to have transfer knowledge. We want businesses to be thriving and pay taxes to support social services. And so that's very important to us. And the third angle is the one that you mentioned there, which is promote intra-Africa trade. We realize that when we trade with each other, it's with a higher value add. That's a humongous market. That's the whole appeal of scales. And so that's something that we very much want to promote. I'm very happy to say that FEDA is also the fund manager for the AFCFTA fund in collaboration with Afrexim and the AFCFTA Secretariat in Ghana. So that's the idea behind FEDA. We have been very bold in our investments. We have invested more than $500 million into Arise IIP. Arise IIP is an infrastructure play that's very important. It's industrial parks in Africa that essentially provides entrepreneurs with land, OEM services, logistical services to allow them to come in, plug and play, produce with value add, exports with clear logistical route to do so efficiently. And then we have ecosystem within the zones where one company might be the supplier of another, and so on and so forth. And so we've been able to transform timber in Gabon that used to be exported raw log. Now is being transformed. That has tremendously transformed the timber industry and what it contributes to the country. We have done the same in Benin with cotton, where raw cotton is now being transformed in Benin, and you can buy T-shirts at children's plays in the US, etc. That's the type of things that we want to do. We're doing the same with meat in Chad and many different verticals that are well studied, where we have a comparative advantage. So that would be one example, but we have invested in the refinery of Cabinda in Angola. Again, the idea was to say we cannot be exporting raw crude and re-importing processed oil. It doesn't make sense for an environmental climate perspective, doesn't make sense for a development value perspective. Let's do it in-house. We are, like I said, just doing many other things, but I'll stop here for now.
Thank you.
You know, as Astria and Marlene speak, I realized that you asked me, who do you see that's new in the ecosystem, and we spoke a bit about that. But it's also who you're doing business with. Blended finance makes for unexpected bedfellows. So if 2 years ago you had said to me that I would be in a deal with UNDP, I would have been surprised by that comment. And yet, just last month, we signed a deal, as you know, with UNDP to support climate innovation across the global south. And when I sat with Astria and her team in New York, what I found was, as I told her, it's not my grandfather's UNDP, right? They're much more commercially minded than I had understood them to be. Very savvy on the facts and on the nature of innovation. And then as we were wiring up in the green room before this meeting, I found that Marlene has just invested in an entity that is before our investment committee now. So you can hear that obviously UNDP has a strong humanitarian brand, right? And FEDA, as you can hear, is deeply commercial in its orientation, and we sit astride those worlds. And what you find when you get into blended finance is that you're working across those.
Yeah. No, I think that's such a great point to make. And as 500 Global, as a firm that started in venture capital, today sitting up here with all of you now talking about the way climate financing is changing, particularly in emerging markets. 5 years ago, I don't know that would have been the case. And I believe that's also one of the really exciting things that we're seeing is so many partners coming together that previously would not have been a part of this world. Jonathan, just maybe, I know you sit on several boards. I'm curious, from the investment perspective, tell us some lessons that you've learned related to large-scale climate financing.
Yeah, so the boards I sit on are both operational companies and funds or fund managers, right? And so the first thing I would say is that at both levels, at both fund level and at the company level, commercial viability has to be key, right? You have to remain commercial, and it's hard in light of the sort of dual purpose mission that we all share and that represent blended finance. But it is a absolutely critical discipline to the future of the sector, right? And you can find yourself, it's easy to wander from it. So that's the first thing I would say. So when we look at fund managers to work with, we are always looking at what has been their track record, right? What has been their IRR? What's their ability to attract commercial funds? We have a collaboration with 500 Global that you and I have worked on for some time. That is why we were attracted to 500 Global, is because of exactly its commercial track record. I sit on the board of Factor E, that also, and through them have supported a fund called Equator Fund. Both of those is the same criteria, right? What has been the track record of scaling, of bringing companies to scale and attracting commercial capital? And it's only through that you can achieve commercial long-term success for the entities, but also the commercial leverage we seek. We achieve between 12 and 14x leverage of our money to other money that's brought in, right, on an annual basis. And last year, 84% of that money was commercial. You're only going to be able to do that if you maintain that kind of commercial discipline. Yeah. So, I would jettison all other points for that one.
No, that's very enlightening. And I'm curious as well, I mean, given the change we've seen, not just in the structures, but now the partners that we're talking about, really having this focus on the commercial outcomes, is there ever any tension that gets created when we're trying to bring in perhaps other organizations who are more philanthropic in nature or less commercially minded? How do you all navigate that?
Yeah, I bet each of us has in one form or another come across that.
Yeah.
There is the potential for that tension. We try to remove that tension as much as possible, if we can, entirely, right? Because we do not want to dilute the commercial viability of the entity. That means that we are very selective, right? So we've probably looked at, so there was a wave of environmentally oriented emerging market funds from the world's leading commercial institute, the world's leading institutional managers, many of whom are here at FII, right? We must have looked at 20 such funds from really global brand name, top tier managers. We got down to 2 that met our impact thresholds out of some 20 absolutely top flight organizations. So for us, it's a matter of selectivity. But once you've been selective, you have to make room for the commercial viability. You have to get out of the way.
Yeah. No, that's really.
I'd be interested to hear what my colleagues.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think that we try to really stay away from. I was mentioning to Jonathan from FAD. I want businesses to outlast us as FEDA, and so especially when it comes to climate smart technologies, we see a lot of people being attracted by the fad. We want it to be long lasting, and so we really look before we make an investment at the economical model, the viability of it from all of the stakeholders' perspective, to ensure that it sticks, and that's what we want. Obviously, there's always room for people who have more flexible capital, more concessional capital. That's always very welcome, but it will always be structured with the approach of making the business strive, making it successful, so that is EBITDA positive, self-sustainable, not depending on raise to cover cash burn. We want those businesses to reach that level, to scale, to eventually expand regionally, achieve economies of scale, and just be long-lasting. That's very much something that we focus on. And whoever is at the cap table, we make sure that they're aligned with that vision.
And maybe staying on this point a little bit more, and you're talking about some of these larger plays trying to scale. What sort of headwinds are you actually seeing, in the past couple of years in particular, for some of these startups operating in highly regulated spaces?
I know I'll give you an example of one investment that we just made. So we just invested, we just led a fundraising round for Spyro. Spyro is today the largest electrical mobility company in Africa. As you know, if you've been to Africa, a lot of people still use motorbike as taxis. So Spyro is present in Rwanda, in Nigeria, in Uganda, in Benin and Togo, and has a pipeline of countries where they want to be, and to lead those efforts. And again, as I mentioned, what we looked at is to say we look at those motorbike drivers as micro-entrepreneurs. We want them to increase their income, so they should be able to purchase the bike cheaper. And when they look at their spend, it should be lower than fuel cost. And so that's what we found. That's what convinced us. Secondly, there was the opportunity to assemble the bikes in Africa. We thought that was important to, again, create jobs, value-add jobs for African and businesses that pay taxes on the continent. Then we had to work with an ecosystem to say those bikes need to be financed, so the banks need to play their part. We need to work with government to say when we import those parts to assembly, we need to have some sort of tax incentive, etc. So everybody played their part, but what we like to do at FEDA and at Afrexim is to say, let's be intentional and transformational. So rather than investing into one small company that's local, we have a business model that works. We have fundamentals that are true in Rwanda and Nigeria and Uganda. Let's do it, and let's push it, and let's be bold. That's why we put in $75 million. Wow. And I do hope you will join us very soon as well when you complete your due diligence. But that's what we want to do, because that to us brings the type of impact that we seek, and then build stronger, more resilient businesses as well.
I like the framework you've shared of intentional and transformational. Astria, sharing a little bit more maybe on the startup side, I know you've spent a lot of time taking a grand tour around the continent, really learning kind of what the industries are that are key in particular countries where we're launching hubs. What are you seeing right now that's exciting for you in terms of the actual innovations that are being developed?
Well, I guess before I answer this Very important question. Just on the potential tension between
Yes, please.
this financial, I would say, performance and the more sustainability or aspect. So within UNDP, actually, Afreximbank was incubated somehow within UNDP. And this idea of sustainability is embedded in what we do. And today, more than ever, the financial sustainability of what we do is super important. So the entire Timbuktu initiative is structured in that way. And also, but also what is interesting is that this tension, I feel, is more and more or less and less important in the sense that I've read a study recently when it comes to impact investing. So impact investing is a complicated space, but more and more when we look at it, we realize that given the level of data that impact investing requires to understand about the business, we can actually achieve higher returns and better returns on the businesses because there are way more improvement points that are identified through a proper IMM impact measurement and management system. So I think there's a world where we can actually really make those two components work together. And it's not that we can, it's that we have to. From my perspective, because I said earlier that Timbuktu is a reform agenda for the UN, but I hope that it also a reform agenda for the private sector and the way those startups that will eventually become businesses will operate in a way that is way more sustainable in every term of the sense, in every sense of the term. And so going back to your question, indeed, as we were designing Timbuktu back in 2021, I had the chance and the privilege to go across about 20 African countries to locate those 10 hubs and make the selection of the hubs and the thematic. And so since we are primarily talking about climate smart technology, what we've observed recently, because once again, as part of our Green Tech Hub that is based in Nairobi, which is actually the first hub where we're implementing this model of partnership with 500 and Shell Foundation, we worked on what we call a strategic roadmap. So we've tried to imagine what would be the best case scenario for the green tech space, the climate space, 10 years from now on the African continent. And what we've realized and what we try to identify were what are the competitive advantages of the continent where we can develop startups that solve local problems, but that can also grow globally and serve the entire world. And right now we are looking at very interesting solutions that are relying on blockchain, for example, on AI, obviously, and especially when it comes to climate data. AI is a game changer, and currently we are in discussion with NVIDIA to actually create a green tech AI hub so that we can start exploring all the ways AI can be applied to green tech, right? And what is interesting is that when you look at other regions in the world, it's a question that everyone is asking now. So on this space, Africa is not late, if I can say so. We actually have a real chance to make a difference on this topic, and because we also have like a space to test and implement those solutions in a way that might not be possible in other regions when you have legacy infrastructure that can actually slow down innovation and slow down testing of those new approaches. So I'm really, really excited to see how it's going to progress. And so in our batch of startups, we have a couple of them that are actually looking at those solutions. And so that's very exciting.
Yes, we're quite excited, having just launched our first 15 companies going through our program. Jonathan, any comments on that?
You know, reflecting on what Astria was saying, I'll put in a word on the relevance of this to this market, to the Gulf market, right? So first of all, though we're speaking of Africa and we have been involved in Africa since our inception 25 years ago, blended finance and climate tech are at play across the developing world, right? Our initiatives together span Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Africa, right? And at the center of that region, not just geographically, is the Gulf, and leadership more easily flows from here to across the whole global South, right? Not just by virtue of geography, as I say, but by virtue of knowledge of those markets, deep familiarity with those markets that, frankly, our colleagues in the north, in Europe and the U.S. just lack, right? We find our colleagues here have that familiarity, and also with familiarity of experience. You know, Austria just mentioned there's an opportunity here to go past those areas that have legacy, that are held back by legacy. That's the whole story of the Gulf, of UAE, and of Saudi in particular, right? They have proven the notion of leapfrogging, which is often just a theory, right? You see it here. You see it in this very room. Yeah. So to me, the natural leadership of the expansion of climate tech across the global South is here.
Amazing. Well, on that note, I'd like to say thank you for spending the time with us and for the work that you're doing and we're doing together. So appreciate the time and looking forward to seeing even more incredible investments and impact being made.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi. Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to talk about something that's probably been discussed but not framed comprehensively at this conference, which is innovation that happens outside the traditional ecosystems. We hear about it a lot. The panel that was on just now was talking about a flavor of that. But there's a wonderful word that the CEO and founder of Endeavor, where Alan has been a partner for a very, very long time, 30, 60 years, something like that.
19 years, but and she was on our board.
She uses this word elsewhere, Linda Rotenberg. And elsewhere means all the markets outside the very obvious traditional venture ecosystems of Silicon Valley and China, and maybe Israel. Those three are classically the leading venture capital ecosystems in the world, but we're not going to talk about those today. We're going to ignore them completely and talk about elsewhere, which includes Europe, by the way. Europe is part of elsewhere, for better or worse, and Turkey is part of elsewhere, better or worse. But before we start, maybe very quickly, Alan, we'll start with you. Talk about Endeavor Catalyst, talk about Endeavor, and talk about your rough 1 to 2 sentences on elsewhere.
Sure. Well, given that introduction, it's a fairly easy way for me to explain what I do. I invest in elsewhere. So Endeavor is a global nonprofit organization that we started 27 years ago, headquartered in New York City with an office in Silicon Valley, but actually with teams and offices and people today in 63 different cities around the world, in more than 45 countries, and predominantly in Latin America, Africa.
Originally in Latin America.
The Middle East, parts of Europe you might not expect, and Southeast Asia.
Like, what's the surprising part of Europe you might not expect?
The biggest markets for us in Europe are Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, Greece, Spain, Italy, etc. So not Germany, France, UK, Nordics. My role today, I run Endeavor Catalyst, as you mentioned. That's a $500 million platform for early stage venture, Series A and B, investing into the very best entrepreneurs from all of these places. So the contrarian belief of Endeavor and of our venture firm and of my own is that there are truly amazing entrepreneurs everywhere, and you can build really, really big companies in all these other places as well. You don't have to move to Silicon Valley.
Awesome. And Dilek, maybe talk about ScaleX and your thesis.
Sure. Actually, I am coming from one of the elsewheres too. I started venture capital in Istanbul actually, and I was lucky to invest some of the best Endeavor companies when they were ugly ducks in their early days. But we do invest inception to seed, really early stage, high tech. I don't want to call it deep tech, but we always look for a strong IP that wanna create global category leaders.
And this is just Turkish founders in Turkey, or Turkish founders everywhere, or
yeah,
all kinds
it's
of founders?
Turkish diaspora everywhere, mostly in Silicon Valley, London, and some of them are going to the Asia too. So it's more like a global base, but in an AI era, they always have to be in Silicon Valley somehow, but their customers are all around the world. But we also bring the successful founders to support them because it takes a village to create global success stories.
So this is already an interesting, I wouldn't call it a tension, but difference, because Alan, you focus on specific markets where people are building in those markets, and Dilek, you focus on the Turkish founders that are not building in Turkey, that are going to build somewhere else, even though Endeavor Catalyst, some of your best returns have been in Turkey. Right?
Correct.
Yes.
Locally in Turkey itself. So maybe I'll start with you, is why do you want these founders to go somewhere else and build instead of convincing them to stay in Turkey and build?
Actually, I don't want them to build somewhere else. I want them to sell somewhere else. So I bet on the talent pool more than anything else because I'm so inception phase. Like my best performing companies, I invested in them before they founded their companies, to be honest. So why? I mean, when I started venture in Turkey, it was less than $100 million investment. Endeavor was probably the only global company who are supporting the ecosystem. Now in the last 5 years, 9x growth, and they are creating global billion-dollar companies. So that was my bet. And if you look at the market opportunity, Turkey is 1% of the IT spending. And why not, if you are creating something global level, go and serve the global markets?
And presumably you focus on B2B companies selling.
Mainly B2B.
Because Turkey, within Turkey, has had very successful B2C,
Yeah, B2C companies for sure.
outcomes.
Yes.
Alan, what are the most surprising companies that don't look like the typical company that you have come across in your elsewhere journey? And the reason I ask that question, it's very easy to look at Silicon Valley and say, that worked,
Yeah.
let's do that here.
Yeah.
And there was a wave of that in 2010 to 2020, let's
Yeah.
say, all over the world. I'm not sure that works so well.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could comment on that point, but also describe what you found in some of these markets that surprised you, because it's so different. It's a different kind of species of animal
Yeah.
than what you might discover in Silicon Valley.
Okay, maybe I'll start with a framework and then answer the question about the most surprising type of company. But the framework is, when I moved home to California, where I grew up 15 years ago, and I tried to explain what we did at Endeavor, everybody in venture capital on Sand Hill Road basically said, okay, but outside the US, there's only two models, right? You have to be China or you have to be Israel. This was how they understood it. China was, you can build a really big single country domestic B2C type business, which we've actually seen now in a bunch of other regions like Mercado Libre or Nubank becoming extremely big businesses in Latin America. Israel was, okay, innovation anywhere, but then go sell to the US.
Similar thesis.
Right, to what Dilek
With
described.
strong IP, right?
Both of those things still exist, right? So if we double click on Turkey, like you've got Yemek Sepeta, that's like local food delivery in Turkey for Turks, $700 million exit with General Atlantic, etc. You've got Peak Games and a number of the gaming companies, actually global consumers making money in dollars or euros, but local cost base in Turkey. I think the most interesting thing is there now is kind of a third kind of company, which is not the Israel model of targeting B2B SaaS in the US, but we're going to build a truly global business from anywhere, right? And the Turkish example of this is Insider, which started in Turkey and now is HQ'd in Singapore and is selling and present in 100 countries, right? It's not like a US concentrated
And
play.
describe Insider. What are
So
they?
Insider is a marketing automation platform that basically saw that so much of the growth in their own business was coming from Asia that they left Istanbul and moved the HQ to Singapore. And now they sell all over the US, all over Europe, all over Latin America, more into Africa. But they have a view that the world isn't just China and the US, right? There's actually customers in 100 plus countries around the world. And I think the most surprising things we see at Endeavor are in this new third category, like a business you wouldn't expect. I mean, we were just chatting about one of them. Maybe I'll mention it to the group. There's a headline in the news today of a business called Bending Spoons. Any of you ever heard of Bending Spoons? Okay, a couple years ago,
Decent number.
nobody had. Then they bought Evernote, and they bought Vimeo,
And
this morning they bought AOL.
Oh.
Well, they did it a few weeks ago, but it was announced this
today,
morning.
yeah. And they're based in
Milan, Italy.
Milan, Italy. And
Italy.
more than half of their team is Italian still.
Correct. So I think this idea of like you can build a new company for the next decade from anywhere on the planet is actually a really interesting one.
Yeah, and Dilek, on this point of copy-paste, you're there at the initial phase of the company. So as you're working with these founders, I'm sure there's a temptation to say, look at that worked, let's do the same thing. How do you deal with that? What do you find that's surprising in the companies that really work that ends up being different from the copy-paste?
Yeah, actually,
Silicon Valley or Israel?
we are teaching at the same Stanford class, and their main topic is like how the emerging hubs change from copycat to the new
great.
generation.
Perfect. Please teach your class.
It's going to be a hard one, long one. But
Homework expected.
Insider model or even the bending spoons.
Yeah.
We have the bending spoons model in Turkey, 3 of them. They are all making more than $1 billion revenue each. And Genesis, another bending spoons model coming out of Ukraine.
Ukraine.
Like imagine Italy, Ukraine, and Turkey are building those like app layers.
Buying legacy American tech companies. It's kind of crazy.
Maybe
Yeah.
more. But for the, I have another story. I love this market, for example, for the customer base. One of my first angel investment was into a cybersecurity company. Everybody told me I was crazy to invest in a cybersecurity company coming out of Ankara, not even in Istanbul. But they came to Saudi, UAE, they went to Singapore, as Alan said, and nobody understood what they were doing at the beginning. But then everything changed all of a sudden. Like they were the ugly ducks of early days, and then like listening customers going to markets that growing, where the really good customers are, that made the biggest change. And now they are the #1 in their category, just to give you an example. But how I keep myself to find the next 10 years legendaries, like I have to reshape my thinking from scratch all over again. Just to give you an idea, I just invested in a company who is finding materials with AI and creating robotic labs. I would never thought I would invest in
Robotic laughs.
Yes, robotic labs. So they would find more materials in the lab. So, like I'm trying to think what are the biggest problems for the future, and actually, and also who are the best minds working on those problems.
Because I'm the moderator, I'm going to answer my own question.
Yeah. What do you think, Shu?
Yes.
Who has heard of Kaspi? Fewer people than have heard of Bending Spoons. Kaspi is a company from Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan's population is 20 million people. GDP per capita is something like 13,000. This is not a big country. It doesn't have a ton of disposable income. Kaspi is listed in New York with a market cap of $15 billion. Everybody is surprised by that set of statistics. And the reason why is because they have built a very different kind of company. Instead of saying, we're going to do one thing for a lot of people and build a large company that way, they said, we're going to do everything for 20 million people. Everything. You run your life through Kaspi in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
And that idea is not a Silicon Valley idea. Maybe it's more of a China idea, but not even quite. That's kind of a new idea. And a great example of why you can find innovation elsewhere that is translatable to other elsewhere markets, but is completely irrelevant in Silicon Valley. Kaspi makes no sense in Silicon Valley. And my challenge, for example, I go to Chile a lot, which has 20 million people, per capita GDP of 19,000, 50% more than Kazakhstan. And they say, oh, it's impossible to build a big company in Chile. And my first question is, have you heard of Kaspi? And they say no. So
Chile and Kazakhstan are fairly far apart.
fairly far apart. But tech is a global business.
Yeah, yeah.
So I love these very unique examples. Let's talk about the people who really matter, LPs.
Okay.
We're in the business of convincing LPs to do things. And then we go prove that our ideas are correct. And often LPs in most parts of the world who care about technology and innovation and disruption, all these themes, they want to do one thing, which is invest in Silicon Valley. And the second thing they want to do is invest in Silicon Valley. And you need to go down that list to get to the don't invest in Silicon Valley. How do you deal with that? Starting with you, Dilek.
Me?
Yes.
First, I started with the successful founders, to be honest. The ones that I invested as an angel investor or in my previous VC that I worked. So that was the comfortable zone. That's how I dealt with it. And actually, a really good friend from Endeavor, he told me once, like elsewhere, the spillovers are happening, which means I think that's one of the biggest stories that we live through. When you have success stories, a couple of them happening, all of a sudden people who saw those stories go out and build their own companies, which becomes more successful. It's what we see in like so many, like Brazil, Argentina, Turkey, so many elsewhere. So I kind of ride that, and my LPs usually are the successful VCs who invested in that thesis and became so successful, and family offices bet on the talent pool. So
And
that's
these are
how I
all
deal with
within
it.
Turkey?
No, from Australia to US, Germany, Netherlands. It's mostly about the talent, young talent, growing global, and those spillover effect points.
But how did you find that tribe of LPs? Australia? Did you go
Yes.
to all these places and say, I have a story to tell you?
No, I
How-
just
how do
had
you
a
find-
couple of believers who made money with me. So I think it's also, I've been in this job for a long time. One LP came because we co-invested at Insider at early stage. I had to drag him into the deal. Now he returned his fund. So I think it builds up by time, but it's hard to convince people about elsewhere thesis.
Making people a lot of money is a pretty good way to get them to be your LP
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
future. But you can't do it very fast, right?
Yes.
That's
Takes-
the hard
takes
part.
That's
some
a
time.
low yield process.
And
Yeah.
so, Alan, you're marketing a fund right now.
Yes.
Talk about that fund and talk about how for all the previous funds leading up to this, you've found this group of believers in the thesis of elsewhere.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start by saying, we've raised 4 funds, about $540 million so far. We're raising $300 million more for what will be our 5th fund next year. But 95% of our capital is high net worth individuals and family offices, meaning we are finding believers in the private markets where the institutional pools of capital do not believe in this thesis yet.
Why do you think that is?
I think because if you go to the big asset allocators, who are professional money managers, they sit in a place where they can't have a particularly large amount of imagination, right? They have to look backwards at what has worked over the last 10 or 20 or 30 years. And because venture is relatively new in a lot of these elsewhere markets, when they say, where are my exits from Africa? I say, guys, we just started investing in Africa as a venture industry 5-6 years ago, right? So if you're looking for the 15-year track record, it's not there yet, right? And I think a little bit to what Dilek said, when we raised our fund 1 a decade ago, we needed the true believers, right? We needed people who would actually just take a bet on this with us and give it a shot. Today I can say, hey, look, the beta fund is 8x and fund 1 is 4x, and watch how this thing is going to work, right? But I think you do have to kind of demonstrate that it's possible. maybe I'll tell one LP anecdote that might help
Please.
bring it to life. A lot of our LPs, and they're willing to be public about it, but they're high-profile entrepreneurs themselves. Right? This is Reid Hoffman, who built LinkedIn, Michael Dell.
Which is part of the benefit of the Endeavor Network.
Yeah, exactly.
Get people who've done the same thing and succeeded. And
Totally.
They get it.
Yeah, we have successful entrepreneurs who understand, like, this is actually how you change the world.
Yeah.
One of those guys is Steve Case, the guy who built AOL.
Now owned by Bending Spoons.
Well, so here's the story. When Steve first put money in our fund 10 years ago, he did this, I think, largely as a kind of philanthropically minded thing. He said, oh, I really believe and I want there to be great companies in other places, so I'll put some money in Endeavor. And maybe someday I'll even go and buy one of these companies in one of these exotic places you guys work in. Right? So I sent Steve a note a couple of weeks ago.
They call that a research check.
Yeah. I sent Steve a note and said, hey, Steve, just so you know, I still have this email where you said maybe you'll buy one of our companies someday, and one of our companies just bought AOL. Right? And so the reality is things are already at this place where venture has globalized, but I think there's a lag on the way, particularly LPs, think about it, because we're rooted in these data sets from the past.
And in not underperforming our benchmarks. I think there's a really pernicious, it's not pernicious, it makes sense, but there's this idea that you can't underperform your peers. Mm-hmm. The result is everyone does the same thing. Mm-hmm. Nobody tries to outperform their peers because then you might underperform your peers. But if you all do the same thing, then by definition, you won't underperform.
Correct.
I want to talk about exits because the business of this business isn't unicorns. It's exits. And frankly, I think the idea of unicorns is one of the most poisonous concepts ever to be created and disseminated in global venture.
Don't tell my 6-year-old daughter, she loves unicorns.
Not those unicorns.
Oh, not those ones, okay.
Not those unicorns. Those are special. Because it convinces ecosystems, companies, talent,
That's the goal.
that what they want to be is a private company worth $1 billion.
Yeah.
And they'll do all kinds of things to become a private company worth $1 billion. Grow revenue super fast, raise money at valuations that don't make sense, instead of focusing on the thing that actually matters, which is making money for their investors. When I was a banker in Silicon Valley more than 10 years ago, the bread and butter was $200 to $700 million M&A. Mm-hmm. That made Silicon Valley turn. They put money back in the ecosystem. Nobody's talking about unicorns.
Yeah.
And then this idea showed up, and now ecosystems everywhere say, we have 10 unicorns.
Yeah.
We have 15 unicorns. My fund has 4 unicorns. That's become the currency of this business. And I think it's awful for elsewhere markets because what you need is just a machinery of exits. So how do you deal with this? What do you think we can do to get rid of that word? Dilek, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts?
I just did 3 exits this year just to have that cash and liquidity get into the market. But before, I want to give a more context. So what happened till 2021, zip period, let's say.
Zero interest rate.
Zero interest rate environment.
Free money, yeah.
We have $2.4 trillion under management for venture asset class.
I thought you meant your fund. Well done.
Whole industry. But when I started, it was 100 billion, and Masa, when he built the $100 billion fund, it was doubled. So imagine from there to here, 10x. So we have so much capital in the market for sure, which creates that unicorn craziness. It's not about creating real company to create value, but it's about the names, tags. So what I care, how can I get in early and get a big chunk of the company and help them to create real value? So that's how I was been focusing on. But the last 3 exits, to be honest, P's, M&A, I think that's opened up last year for sure. For IPOs, everybody's waiting, I guess. But last year when we were at panel with Alan, our common investment insider, they just raised 500 million at a couple of billion dollars.
A big valuation.
And angel investors made 500x pluses. So that's a real value for our LPs at the end of the day. That's what we are looking for, how we can get in early, get a good chunk of the company, and create a real value at the end of the day.
Well, and that's also part of a structural answer, right? Which is secondaries need to be part of this solution. I think there's a structural piece and a narrative piece. The structural piece is we actually do need more liquidity, right?
Yeah.
We need to solve for a better global stock market. We need to solve for M&A. We need to solve for secondaries. We need to do all of those things, I think, as an industry. We also need better storytelling and better narratives, because I agree with you completely, Shu. Like, let's take an ecosystem as an example, right? Let's do Tunisia, right? So Tunisia has a business called Expensia, gets acquired for 100 million bucks. Then it has InstaDeep, gets acquired for 700 million bucks. Tunisia's not like a big market, right? Now it's North Africa's produced Yassir, the guy's Algerian, but building out of Tunisia. It's going to be a multi-billion-dollar exit. But until he has that exit, the currency is everyone says, oh, he's a unicorn, right? Once that exit happens, I think that will be extremely productive in showing how
But
you
do they
scale
talk
that
about
up.
the 100 and 700 exit proudly?
We need to do better at that, is I guess what I'm saying. Look,
Because that's the rare thing.
yeah.
They made money, it got back into the ecosystem.
Yeah, so I guess do Nigeria. Maybe it's a little simpler. Nigeria has a $200 million.
Nigeria's never simpler.
Okay, but the
Possible.
$200 million exit for Paystack,
Yeah.
right, acquired by Stripe, and now it has like unicorns, including Flutterwave, that all the headlines are from a few years ago. Or Flutterwave is a $3 billion company. These guys are all in Endeavor, right? So it's this safe space. The global media sure has told the Flutterwave story a lot more than the Paystack story, but the Paystack story has been way more
Catalytic.
important for the ecosystem, catalytic, for good word choice,
Yeah.
for the ecosystem. So maybe we need to just try to get people focused on telling some of those stories more effectively, so entrepreneurs focus on the right stuff.
But
From your lips.
also, like, it's not just the elsewhere problem. I think now the top 10 private company is getting the more than 50% of the whole value, even in US. I think the market is becoming like a barbell market. Either you have giants or the rest.
But
even
this
unicorn doesn't mean anything compared.
But this
Are
side
you-
of the
are you
market-
500 billion or you don't
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, that's
right?
not venture capital anymore, though. I
Yeah.
don't know what that
it
is,
isn't.
but
It isn't, which is a whole other discussion. All right, so one sentence, not more, to leave with the audience on this whole topic, everything we've discussed. Who wants to go first? Alan.
there are 3 economies in the world, comma, the United States, China, and elsewhere, comma. If you want to be a part of elsewhere, keep showing up in places like Dubai and Riyadh, because these are the capitals of the future.
Yeah.
Dilek?
So I believe
Great
in
sentence.
How'd I do?
Yeah, good. You cheated.
talent is global, opportunities are not. I always advise my founders, go where the growth is. I think here, China, US, the growth is happening so many different places. I encourage founders to go and find those growth places.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. If you're here, you're really interested about startups and companies that come from different parts of the world. And I have the pleasure to have with me Sergio Fogel, who is the CEO and co-founder of dLocal. comes out of Uruguay. I don't know how many here in the audience actually know where Uruguay is, but it's only a 3 million people country, and dLocal is now not only a unicorn, exited, listed, and has operations in over 40 countries. So really, really happy to host it here and showcase what he has built all the way from Latin America to the world. I'm Laura Gaviria, and I'm gonna let you, Sergio, start by sharing with us what is dLocal, how you started, and like the origin story.
Thank you very much. Let me first correct you. I'm not the CEO of the company.
Oh, sorry.
I'm president,
Now that you're
co-founder, and chief strategy officer. Okay, so briefly, what we do, again, we started from Uruguay. Actually, our first country was Brazil. And what we do is we help large companies from all over the world accept payments in emerging markets. So it's quite easy today, and it's a solved problem to accept payments in the US or in Europe, where the credit card rails worked like a charm. But when you go to a place like Brazil or like Mexico, India, South Africa, you find that if you only accept Visa and MasterCard, large chunk of your target customers will not be able to pay you. So we bridge that gap. We bridge the gap between the largest companies in the world and emerging markets that have their own peculiar payment system. And our value proposition, essentially, it's conversion. Use us, and more people will be able to pay for your products or services.
And can you give an example of what are those like products and services that if they didn't have you, like they just couldn't get? I think for some of us who now live, like in my case in the US, we take for granted some of the access that we have. Can you share a little bit more of those details?
Yeah, we have many different verticals that we serve. One of the biggest one is e-commerce. A lot of Chinese e-commerce companies that want to sell into the Middle East, Africa, Latin America. We have a lot of ride sharing. We have a lot of streaming services, software as a service, education, and we also serve quite a lot of the opposite flow, the flow of money into emerging markets. Gig economy, remittances, remote workers. So that's the opposite flow of money that are mostly people that get paid for the work.
And as you mentioned, like this is a global company, but that has to work in very local markets. How has been that process, and how do you gain trust not only from the consumer but as well from the governments when you enter these different countries?
Yeah, you nailed a very important point. We operate in a highly regulated industry. Payments is highly regulated, and cross-border payments is even more highly regulated. There are different flavors of regulation, but all over the world, I think you can group it in 3 or 4 playbooks. So we have a team of global expansion. Today we are in over 50 countries now.
Now 50,
the marketing
okay.
material is outdated. Yeah, so in those countries we have a global expansion team, and they have done this so many times that they already have their their playbooks, and they go to every country. So the first thing that we do is we approach a law firm specialized in regulation. Normally an accountancy, we have of course an auditor and so on, and then we approach regulators. In many cases, the regulation is not there yet.
Okay.
So we have been doing a big work of educating regulators and putting some regulators in contact with other ones.
What has been like a framework of regulation from which country that you have used to basically educate others that don't have that regulation in place?
Okay, again, there are like 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4 different schemes. So you have like the highly regulated countries like South Africa, Morocco, Egypt, Argentina. Then you have the more liberal ones, like can be Chile, Uruguay, big part of the Middle East, and some that are somewhere in between. And within each one of those groups, as you said, well, there are some regulators that have done a very extensive work, and they have set up very interesting frameworks. Probably the most interesting ones are Brazil and India.
Okay.
Brazil has an amazing scheme that is probably one of the most successful schemes anywhere in the world. That is PIX.
Maybe share a little bit of what PIX is and what the government was able to achieve with that.
Yeah, PIX, the BACEN, the Brazilian central government, decided around 7 years ago to digitalize the payment system, and they came up with this system called PIX. It went live, if I'm not mistaken, in 2021. It's a scheme originally based on a QR code, and it's virtually free to accept payments, and it's mandatory for all banks. So every bank is mandated to integrate with PIX. So what happened is that the PIX scheme completely took over the whole of Brazil. You go today to any store will accept PIX. Any taxi driver will accept PIX. Actually, they will prefer PIX to a credit card. Even beggars on the street will have a QR code and will accept the payments with PIX. So that was the initial...
Yeah, and it replaces cash completely, which is very hard in these countries that function 100% with cash.
It replaced cash, especially in a country that has a crime problem. So it changed in a way the crime. Now there's some more digital crime, but they're also fighting it. And it completely replaced debit cards. Debit card volume went virtually to zero. So that was the original PIX, and then they started to sophisticate it. Today you have PIX credit that's coming up very soon. You have what they call the tap to PIX. So essentially it's the same PIX, but instead of scanning a QR code, you can tap and use a NFC. So it's a faster experience. And they have just recently come up with a new scheme. It's still under trial, which is more like it's more catered to businesses. It's a central bank digital currency together with a blockchain-based treasury system. So it's very new, very interesting to keep an eye on it.
Before going to definitely digital currencies and stable coins, you mentioned also India, right? And you have in India a similar model than PIX. Do you believe that what Brazil did was like step up on the Indian model? And do you see other like emerging economies basically taking those two experiences and implementing them in their countries or thinking about implementing them?
Yes. So actually, you have like lots of innovation, and many people don't really see it. Lots of innovation in payments coming from emerging markets. It started even before that with M-Pesa in Africa.
Yes.
And mobile payments in Africa became the standards way before anywhere else in the world. Even before, it wasn't even based on SMS. It was based on another scheme that mobile phones have that virtually no one knows. USSD, it's called. Then I believe that UPI and PIX were developed more or less in parallel. And today you have both of them essentially trying to impose their systems in different countries. And there is a very intense competition between those two schemes, between UPI in India and PIX in Brazil. They are giving the software more or less for free. And Argentina, I know that adopted something very similar to PIX. Colombia is doing something, lots of places in Africa. So one way or the other, one of them is going probably to prevail. Both of them have a big part, but it's going to bring a lot of digitalization to the payments system everywhere.
And every time you enter like a new country, what is the most complicated part? Is it, of course, in hyper-regulated countries, is potentially getting the license? Is it more difficult on those who are regulated or those who actually don't even have the framework for someone like you to come in and do business?
Well, actually, regulation is evolving all over the world, and it's getting tougher and more demanding. So a lot of this is coming from Europe. So Europe seems to be like the pioneer with new regulation. It's normally being adopted also by by California, and then it spreads all over. So it started, of course, with AML and CFT, anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism. But then it moved to data privacy laws, and then it moved to some other challenges. Today it's safeguarding, and we have ESG coming up also with the regulation. So that cost of processing a transaction, the regulatory burden of processing a transaction is getting very, very high. For us, it's very demanding because our average transaction size is below $10, and we process around 10 million transactions per day. So that cost is getting to be really significant. I would say that today our biggest challenge from a regulation point of view has to do with what's called data localization. Mm-hmm. Many countries demand that the data be inside the country. And only inside the country. So that implies major architectural engineering that we've been working very hard on, and should be ready next year.
I'm going to shift a little bit, but I think there's impossible to be in FII this year without talking about, of course, AI and digital currencies and stablecoins. Let's start first with stablecoins. How do you see this evolving in the fintech and payment space?
We see stablecoins, in general crypto, in two ways. One of them, it's a vertical for us. We serve a lot of regulated crypto exchanges and stablecoin issuers and so on. So that's the boring part, let's say. The most interesting part, we see it as an efficiency improvement. Mm-hmm. So it's not all countries allow it. We are very, very mindful of regulation. I would say that that's our main differentiation is how much we care about regulation all over the world. And it's also a barrier to entry to our competitors. But many countries do allow it, and we use it as a way to make transactions cheaper, faster, and more efficient.
And AI, of course. Like, how are you taking advantage of AI to make transactions more efficient, or to change the way that the customer even interacts with you?
We are pioneers in AI. We're using AI in many, many different areas. Of course, to fight fraud, that's like a very basic one. To do AML, it's impossible without AI to monitor 10 million transactions per day. It has to be automated, and it has to be AI. For onboarding customers, merchants. And lately we have a major push to automate processes with AI. Our goal for this year is to replace, we have 1,300 employees. Our goal for this year is to have AI do the work of 100 FTEs. And for next year, it's a much higher goal. Mostly in the fields of software development, customer support, legal, and we will continue adopting it more and more.
And to close, let's just go back to Saudi. There is a huge push here in transformation and advancements in the fintech space. How is dLocal basically playing a role in the local Saudi market? You mentioned, for example, that even yesterday you submitted the application for the license. How else is dLocal being involved in Saudi, and how is it supporting the Vision 2030 for the kingdom?
Yeah, the kingdom is very interesting in digitalization and on having more than 70% of consumer transactions being done digitally. We are part of that, and we see a lot of interest from our clients, which are the biggest companies in the world, in having very efficient payment systems for the Middle East in general and for Saudi in particular. Up to now, we've been working through partners, regulated partners in Saudi. We just submitted an application, and we hope to have a direct presence. We already have a country manager that is going to join us in the coming few days. So we are very, very optimistic about Saudi in particular and the whole Middle East in general.
No, thank you so much, Sergio. We're out of time, but I think it's incredible to be able to showcase super successful entrepreneurs that are coming out of Latin America. And it's very similar markets as well that the Middle East and other emerging markets have. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Very good morning. My name's Ed Bussey. I'm the CEO of an organization called Oxford Science Enterprises. Last day for us here in Riyadh. And before I start, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our Saudi friends and guests who've been hosting us so graciously for this week. It's just incredible energy and positivity through all the conversations we've been having this week. So today I'm going to talk through a pretty unique organization called Oxford Science Enterprises. We're a venture builder. We were set up to look for the most advanced science and technology emerging from Oxford University labs to build companies. And we do that through three specific lenses. Number one, can we commercialize that science? Number two, can we build a business that's going to be worth north of £1 billion in value? And can we solve a fundamental global problem? Every company we build has to pass those three tests. And we're building companies in AI, in quantum, in therapeutics, in robotics, health tech, space, food security. I could go on. If you think about pretty much every single major global problem, we will be building at least one company to solve that problem. What makes OSE special? So 4 things I wanted to call out today, and I'm thinking particularly for those of you who are in the areas of university innovation, innovation ecosystems, interfacing with academics. We've learned over the last 10 years of building OSE some twists and turns, some trial and error. There are a few things that are absolutely critical to make this a success. So the first one is we have a strategic partnership with Oxford University, which gives us, number one, early access to the science and technology emerging from Oxford labs. We also have a university-wide confidentiality agreement, which allows us to engage in very detailed conversations with researchers, academics across the entire ecosystem in a way that is very difficult for them to do with others. The university also has a 5% non-dilutable golden share in OSE. So they're strategically aligned with us. And in return for that share, we receive an equity slice of every single science IP-based spin-out that emerges from the university. Second, we're building businesses off the shoulders of the world's #1 research university. Every single year for the last 10 years, Oxford continues to rank the league tables for the science and tech emerging from it. About £1 billion a year goes into the R&D within the university, and in a way we see that as the pre-seed funding on the shoulders on which we're building our companies. Comprises thousands of researchers, PhDs, 70 Nobel Prize winners. It is truly incredible. And one of the things that amazes me is it has this gravitational pull of researchers, scientists from around the world who come to Oxford to solve, or at least try to solve, some of humanity's biggest challenges. On these shoulders, as I say, through quite a bit of trial and error, we've built a venture building engine. This is absolutely key. And we've been optimizing that over the last 10 years. What does that mean? How does that work? It would be fair to say that we've now cracked that code. It is extremely difficult for those of you involved in this space to translate the world's most advanced science into standalone high-value companies. As I'll come on to show later, we're now doing this on a repeatable basis, but backed by long-term patient capital. I'm a recovering founder. I like to say last 20 years building businesses. It takes 12 to 15 years to build a business out of the lab to a meaningful valuation inflection point. OSE is in year 10. This is, as I say, a long-term patient capital play, and that's how we see the journey for OSE with our companies. Finally, we have a team on the ground. This cannot be done remotely. We have 60 scientists, entrepreneurs, investors within OSE, walking the corridors, in the labs, having coffee with the academics, sadly not Arabic coffee, but certainly some coffee with our academics, on a regular daily basis, sharing ideas and joining the dots sometimes between departments that have never spoken to each other before, to surface commercialization opportunities off the back of that science. And that physical presence in the ecosystem is absolutely key. Within that, one of the key success drivers of this model has been the use of what we call entrepreneurs in residence. We have some incredible academic founders, but actually the killer solution is when you marry up the academic founder with a commercially proven CEO. Somebody who's been on the journey before. Now, in deep tech, it's quite difficult to find those profiles, but in certainly like sectors like health tech, you can find people with the right phenotype who've got the experience, and our sort of killer solution is to marry them up with the academic and to build the business together. We're backed by 75 global shareholders, and we work alongside more than 300 co-investors. We had broadly 3 different types of investor relationships. We have investors who have invested in OSE. We're a company, they buy equity in us, and we deploy that capital into the ecosystem. Number one, an example of that might be QIA, the Qatari Sovereign Wealth Fund, or Temasek, the Singaporean Sovereign Wealth Fund. The second group are those shareholders who've bought equity in us, full exposure to the entire asset class, but also come alongside us as a co-investor on a deal-by-deal basis. So a Google Ventures would be taking that approach. And then the third group is our network of 300 and growing co-investors who come in with us side by side on individual deals, special investors, or generalist investors, quite a lot of specialist investors, but this is where maybe a general catalyst would sit. The other thing I wanted to say about this, we're seeing a really exciting rise in the proportion of corporate VCs investing alongside us, including right down at the seed and Series A stage of the journey of our companies. And we really welcome that because it's a commercial opportunity down the line, but it's also commercial validation of the science and the businesses that we are building. So where are we today after a decade of hard work? I'm very proud of this slide. OSE today is the largest single university venture builder in the world. Now, there are more spin-outs emerging around an MIT and a Stanford, but in terms of a single entity that has proven the engine of building now a company a month in all of those very complex deep science sectors, OSE is now pioneering the blueprint for how to do this at scale. We've got 120 portfolio companies, and I'm really proud that a few weeks ago we delivered our first unicorn exit, a company called Oxford Ionics in the quantum computing space. But what makes me even more excited is that I've got 50 more of these to come, not just in quantum, but in AI, in rare earth minerals, in health tech, in life sciences. We're building a pipeline of companies that are genuinely going to change the world. I say we're in year 10. We weren't expecting to have exits at this point. We see the uptick in realizations, exits to kick in 2 to 3 years' time. But we have had 5 exits so far, totaling about 500 million in terms of return to us. But the big wave is still to come in the next few years. And we're forecast to grow our NAV from 1.3 billion today to more than 4 billion over the course of the next 5 years, so by 2030. So at least 3xing the value of OSE. I'm out here in Riyadh. I've been with 5 of our portfolio companies who are all raising. You might have seen our presentation with them earlier in the week, the showcase event, presenting Alloyed, which I won't go into more now because they presented themselves, and we're also alongside Salience Labs in photonic chips. But I'm just going to call out a couple of the other companies. It's always difficult. I'm not allowed to have a favorite child in the portfolio, and it would imply that one company is better than the others. We have so many incredible companies. But let me just pick out a couple just to give you a sort of breadth of what we're doing. Ultromics. When the world's best cardiologists look at your echocardiogram, the highest accuracy they're able to get to in terms of detecting the potential for a terminal heart attack or stroke is about 40%. Ultromics, with an incredible AI application coupled with a cardiologist, has got that close to 100%. It's a completely transformational business in an area that is killing more people in the US, as an example, than almost anything else. Fractile. At the other end of the spectrum, Ultromics being Series C stage, Fractile has just come out of stealth, just done its seed round, has developed a next generation chip that is faster than anything on the market today. I could say that because I'm the CEO of OSE, but Pat Gelsinger, former CEO of Intel, came in with a personal check. Almost immediately it came out of stealth, a company to watch. We feel we're just warming up. If I point to the left-hand side of this graph here, this is a graph showing the amount of capital being invested in Oxford spin-outs, not just OSE spin-outs, but the ecosystem, the Oxford ecosystem spin-outs. So in 2014, Oxford was maybe generating 3 to 4 spin-outs a year, total capital in around 100 million. We're now running at over 1 billion a year. Across the whole ecosystem. OSE last year, we had about $500 million of that going into just our portfolio companies. We're building circa 10 a year now, 20 companies being produced in total across Oxford. By 2035, bearing in mind MIT generating about 30 spin-outs a year, Oxford's going to be generating between 40 to 50 spin-outs a year, with a total investment projected to be of the order of £5 billion per annum going into the spin-out ecosystem. And we would expect OSE to be comprising about 20%. We're deploying £1 billion a year across the stages of companies we're building. Just to close off, we've run the numbers on our baseline case. The value of the companies that OSE is building in 10 years' time will be worth about 0.6% of total UK GDP. So not only are we building companies that are solving fundamental global problems, we're also moving the needle in a way that is going to have significant economic impact on the UK and beyond. And our underlying mission, and we firmly believe this, is that if the UK and other ecosystems that are building particularly deep tech companies, is that the first trillion-pound company that the UK will build will come out of a deep tech ecosystem in the likes of an OSE. So just to close off, why are we here in Riyadh this week? We're here to showcase 5 of our companies I mentioned earlier. The other reasons are these. All of our companies need to win on the global stage. Every single one of our companies needs to expand internationally. So the second reason we're here is to see if we can establish commercial partnerships between our portfolio companies and our Saudi and regional partners who are here at FII. The second reason we're here is, and I'm generally saying this on the back of a lot of trial and error and quite a bit of error, we've now got the playbook to build companies in deep science out of the lab to $1 billion value. We're very keen to share that playbook with our Saudi partners, and we've got a number of conversations taking place this week to see how we might be able to replicate that model here. And finally, we want to build a launch pad in the region for our companies to access this market, again, with Saudi partners. So do we do that in Riyadh as a launch pad into the wider Gulf region as well? Last but not least, in the same way that our companies are raising capital, OSE is also interested to speak to investors. We don't actually need to raise primary capital. We don't need to raise money at the moment, but we have a secondary market for our shares. We are currently running a process with Goldman Sachs, who are working with potential buyers of existing shareholders who might have been on the journey for 10 years and need some liquidity, etc. But we are open to conversations around investment into OSE, as well as directing investment from potential investors here in the region into our portfolio companies. I'm here with my colleague Polly, sat in front of me. If anyone here, or not here but listening in, would like to talk to us about how you build companies in this way and these ecosystems, we'd love to have that conversation with you. If you have an interest in investing or commercial opportunities with us or with our portfolio companies, we'd also love to hear from you. I think I've timed that with 6 seconds to go, so I'm not sure whether I can do any Q&A or not. No, I'm out of time. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to be here in Riyadh with you all, and we look forward to seeing you again next year.
So, hi, my name is Majid. I'm 20 years old and I'm founder and CEO of Menzel. Menzel is basically a one-stop shop for all labor services. So I'll just start with a number. Saudi adds 3,700 workers per day. That means 1.3 million blue-collar workers per year. And I guess you can just say that we have so much demand for too little supply for catering, transportation, and special accommodation. Riyadh is kind of becoming a city like Paris, San Francisco, London. And to be quite honest, we cannot sustain to house people who have salaries of $800 a month. They're underhoused, they can't really use their own cars or buy their own cars, and they can't buy their own food. I mean, McDonald's alone will take 5% of his paycheck. Just really, just the one Big Mac. So yeah, this is kind of what we do. The market, especially in the GCC, is over $50 billion just on housing alone. And our value proposition, to be quite honest with you, is basically this. If you're Amazon, you're coming to Saudi, you have two options. You can either do the accommodations on your own. So you get the building with the realtor, you license it, you do the asset registration, you buy the assets, you operate every single day, you fix every faucet, every single bathroom, and more. With Menzel, you could just pay us every single month per worker, $100, $120, with a much, much better quality. And to be quite honest, it's much, much cheaper for the labor and the company. For huge companies like Amazon, they always choose to work with us because we save them 30% and above. While for SMEs, we can save them up to 60%. We took this graph for one of our clients. He had 3 workers, north of Riyadh. We charged him 400 SAR per month, which is $110 per month. He ended up paying us 16,000 SAR. Otherwise, he would have paid 40,000. How do we do it? To be completely honest with you, we just make hostels or flat houses that really, really, really look cool and they're cost effective, and we do it better than anyone else. We have over 100 clients right now, all enterprises. We house almost every single Amazon employee, at least in the West Coast. We house Samasco, HR companies, delivery companies, and more. And we started housing governmental employees as well. We house every single sector, no matter the gender, the sector, the background, the culture, doesn't really matter to Menzel much. We grew 30x in the past 10 months just offering this service. Thankfully, the market penetration has been amazing. Almost everyone on the team is 20 years old, 22 years old. We sleep in the office. We try to make it as much fun as we possibly can. So, yeah, is there any question? Thank you. Go ahead.
What are the average prices of some of your per bed inside? Excuse me. First of all, great job on the presentation so far.
Thank you.
Just curious a little bit more about the unit of economics. In terms of the pricing, how do you price compared to the market?
That's a good question. So basically, I'm going to drive you the entire journey from the unit economics. Our unit economics is usually 40% rent, 60% other operating services. So we usually try to charge $100 to $120, not anything above that. And if the company does it on their own, it usually costs a little bit more than that because they take an entire building that may fit 100, but they only have 80. So they're wasting 20% and their cost is always 20% above. And we also do it at scale, so it's much, much cheaper. Usually for huge companies, 22 to 30%, while for SMEs, it's 50 to 60.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Majid, you're also building a brand new community in in Riyadh, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we started building a bunch of compounds across Saudi since we don't really have supply, and it's one of the biggest issues right now. As in, if you have 100 laborers, you wouldn't see any real estate offering just for these laborers. You would find an apartment for the McKinsey employee, the BIF employee, the middle as well, a flight attendant, etc., but not for the blue collar. So we started building 6 buildings across Riyadh, across, 22,000 square meters. So, thank you. Anything else? We ran out of time anyway, so we're good. Thank you.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be here in Riyadh. Love the hospitality completely. And it's going to be a very interesting India-specific panel discussion that you're going to witness over the next 30 minutes. So we're going to be talking to you about India's startup story and what makes it extremely attractive. And I'm going to be discussing India's startup story with my guests. We have Neeraj Singh, founder and CEO, Spinny, with us. Ishpreet Singh Gandhi, who is founder and managing partner, Stride Ventures. We have with us Naveen Tiwari, founder and CEO, InMobi and Glance. And before I start this discussion, ladies and gentlemen, India has got about over 100 unicorns today and about 160,000 startups. So India no longer is, in fact, about catching up. It is about leading the global innovation. And that's what we are going to be discussing here today. We'll be exploring how India can really ignite this next wave, global startup wave. So let me start by asking you, Neeraj, what really makes India different? What is so special about India's startup story?
Indian consumer has in recent times matured tremendously, right? And before operating and building in India was all about building despite having any systems. But because of lots of digital reforms, created by government, now we are building because of systems. And at the same time, consumers have matured a lot. I'll give you our example, Spinny's example. So most of the customers complete their decision making and buying journey online. This was not the case 5 years ago. And previously startups like us used to struggle a lot while monetizing. But now customers are willing to pay if the service level is there, right? So India is a very complex market to operate because of so many reasons. But with initiatives like GST, UPI, government has created lots of rails, right? And now companies like Spinny are building, trains on those rails and leveraging those opportunity to build and scale really faster.
Okay, Ishpreet, what makes India's startup environment quite unique in your opinion? Policy support, capital strength, or digital adoption, the way it is spreading?
Actually, I've been, and all, for that matter, all three of us have been lucky to be witnessing Indian startup story for the past 15, 20 years. I've got exposed to this in 2012, 13 when I was doing it for the banks before Stride started. And I think what Neeraj was referring to, naturally every 3 years, or last 2, 3 years, have been very different to the previous 2, 3 years. So you have to bifurcate Indian story in terms of various demographics. I think what's worked well on policy and regulatory framework is the underlying government reforms. So if you talk about, say, Aadhaar as an enablement, which happened quite a few years back, enabled a lot of personal financing. And similarly, when GST enablement happened in India, it enabled a lot of SME B2B financing. I think today, as we speak, we know that we are sitting on an amazing population. But most importantly, it's the 1 billion active digital users in India, which is a big opportunity, right? How do you blend the policy regulatory framework with understanding of the user and create structures on top of that? And I think whether it's happened on fintech or it's happened on companies like Spinny, who's gone and created a playbook on used car platforms. There are a lot of platforms who've executed well with the right management over years, have seen amazing amount of attraction of capital, but it has to be built on right frameworks. And today that framework can be large language models, an AI framework. How do you have inference for that? So I think every 2-3 years playbooks have kept on changing, and the reason why you have so many unicorns, because ultimately you're talking about an economy which is which in the next 5-10 years can easily be the second largest economy in the world, right? So we have a playbook for that. And it's important that right set of founders with long longevity. Both of the founders sitting next to me are like 10 years plus in the industry, right? So you need to have that hustle plus longevity, have a right policy framework, and then things follow as a matter of fact.
Absolutely. Naveen, what do you think? What makes India's story attractive, different?
I'll give you a different perspective. I completely agree with what both Neeraj and Ishpreet actually mentioned.
That disclaimer was good, that you agree with them and then you have a different
No, I have an additional point. I'll tell you why I'd say this. Look, I think, we are a country where the startup ecosystem started 15 years ago, 17 years ago. It's not that old. But if you were growing in India in the 70s, 80s, 90s, what was the ambition? The ambition was, I will go to Mumbai and become an actor. That was the middle class dream that everybody grew up with, and hardly anybody made it. But the dream was important. In India that we live in today, if you go to the middle class household in a tier 2 or a tier 3 town, what is a boy who is growing up thinking about? The boy who is growing up is thinking about, I actually can make it. I don't need to go to Bombay to become an actor anymore. I just need to essentially have a brilliant idea, leverage technology, get the policy framework, get the capital because it's available, and I can make it big. Bigger than what anybody would have ever imagined. So you have a country which is very young, average age below 27. Everybody sitting there and living a dream of becoming an entrepreneur and changing the world. And that possibility and hope is what I think drives our country very differently. And what you would see, if you look at stats, you may have 100 unicorns, but behind the 100 plus unicorns, you have some 150,000, I don't know what the number is, but some 150,000 startups. The possibility for those 100 to come in was because of the 150,000 actually entered the funnel. And that 150,000 came in because there is hope. And I think our country is going to survive and thrive because this whole new generation is coming in with a very different level of hope that is going to change the country in many ways. For companies like what Neeraj runs, they're solving deep problems in the country which actually nobody else can really solve. They're using technology, they're using new ways to solve for country's problem. What companies like mine, which is in Mobi and Glance, do is to say, why just solve for India? Let's go solve for the world. So the ambition level is about changing the country. It not just changing the country, it's also to go after changing the world. So I think we are living in a world where we are very uniquely positioned, highly ambitious people, a lot of them, and everybody is living with a dream to come out of that middle class.
I'll give you a fun fact. All three of us were not born in tier 1 cities of India. So to his point of ambition, that's the opportunity, right? The scale is the opportunity. The ambition from coming from tier 2 cities to make it to tier 1 cities and then to make it globe is the opportunity. I think well said.
And can I add one more thing to this?
Okay.
Just because I'm in the flow. Look, I think entrepreneurship, startups, is about ability to bear pain. It is our ability to take how much ever pain we can. And I can tell you, the background with which we come, the middle class backgrounds, and combined with the ambition, the pain bearance capability and tolerance is insane.
Of course, with the right regulatory framework, policy environment that we are seeing right now. Ladies and gentlemen, by the way, we've got these three amazing gentlemen here on the stage. You've got Neeraj, who is made in India, whose company is made in India, serving Indians. Naveen, again, a company that's made in India, a startup from India, serving the world. And you've got Ishpreet, whose company is also made in India and funding startups like these and many more. And of course, those which are there around the world as well. So, moving on, let's also talk to you a little bit about what's really happening with the startups. We've spoken about why India is different, why India is attractive, but let's also get to the ground realities. So this question is for both of you, Neeraj as well as Naveen. What do Spinny and Glance's paths reveal about the evolving consumer demand and also monetization paths over the next few years?
Good.
Naveen basically started building in Mobi and Glance even before India Stack, so he would know this better than me, right? But I can tell you one thing. Earlier, internet adoption was more about discovery, but it has come out of age And now people are like, like because of the various reforms, because of that kind of infrastructure, created by the government and all the stakeholders, now people are basically, digitally doing high transaction, high ticket item transactions like home, car, health, insurance, right? So that is the kind of digitally enabled trust economy India is creating, and customers have also started catching up very nicely now. They are more than willing to pay, the justified margins, justified service fee, and that is making businesses more and more viable. And that is why you are seeing that not just Spinny, but many companies like us are able to grow while narrowing their losses, while becoming profitable. So we are able to get on that mindful growth trajectory where we are ensuring growth, but at the same time, right, it is very much viable and sustainable.
Okay.
And all of that is happening because of those reforms maturing now.
Okay.
I'll give you a perspective on this. So, for example, when the internet took off in late 90s, early 2000s, what really happened was the consumer in developing world or in India was completely different from the consumer in the West. So companies that came out basically said, oh, I have to develop for the West, and then we'll figure out something for the, for India or developing countries. Fast forward to today, the highest number of users for GPT is actually Indians in India. What does that mean? It means the adoption of technology because of the age band and the access to internet effectively means that today you can build a product in India that can be applicable across the world. India has three Indias. There is a global India, which basically behaves absolutely like the West. You also have a middle India, which behaves like a lot of developing countries. And you also have a lower India, which behaves like a lot of the world where the economic prosperity does not exist. So if you actually build in India today, and we've done that with Glance as we build it out, we built Glance for the first two segments, and we launched it across the globe. The adaptability, accessibility of that was as if you are building sitting in Silicon Valley. So today in India, you can actually build a product that is applicable across the world in the right spirit. And that is the changed India that you would see. You could not have done that 15 years ago. Certainly you can do that today.
Okay. Ishpreet, how is the investor sentiment really towards India shifting or evolving, looking at what's really happening? What role do you see venture debt, venture capitalists really playing going forward?
So, actually, as we spoken, like there are various segments of businesses which makes investors interest. Most importantly, I think investors want certainty. I think what's good happening with India right now, there's a lot of stability of policy and government, which really excites people to make sure that there can be longevity of an investment. And also, I think typically investment flow in today's time, because of the domestic capital infusion in the country, has been more towards public markets, right? So mid to late stage companies where the unit economics are proven, you're dealing with less uncertainties, the gross margin stacks up, and they have executed at a fair level. The governance standards are very good. I think that's where the certainty comes for investors to flow in. But since we have been speaking here to global investors, we still believe it's barely any allocation to India. Right? If you see mid to late stage of investments, out of all the top global funds, barely 1 to 5% of allocations are going to India. So I think mid to late stage has huge work to do. And there are certain sets.
What would be the reason behind it? Why is it so less?
I think combination of factors, right? And I think Naveen touched upon it. First of all, our own ambitions of dreaming big, right? Speaking and talking about India in breadth of the forums. We were talking about it candidly. This is the first time India is speaking on this as tech ecosystem, what's happening. I think it's important that we get a mind space there with that ambition. At the same time, I think there's a lot of education as well, right? Because there are certain sets of investors who really like India, and there are certain set of investors who do not understand India. So that education of saying, okay, this is what India is, this is about tier 1 India, tier 2, tier 3 India, what Naveen spoke about, these are the nuances to build a business, and at that scale, the magic happens. And you've seen it with listed companies. If you take the top 3 companies of tech which is listed in India, Eternal, Zomato, Policy Bazaar, all of them had done very well. because the penetration, the education of the tech ecosystem, the embracement has only increased over a period of time. So I think it's a matter of speaking at the right, doing right dialogues, educating investors, because most of the investors are not in India. And being not in India doesn't help, right? Because of the fact that there are various nuances of India, there are various things which you need to know. So they are looking at it remotely. And from remote perspective, you can do as much. They know that this economy will go from 4 trillion to 20 trillion or 15 trillion in some point of time, and that's the excitement. And the population and digital adaptation is the excitement. That breadth of education is really required. I think all of us are advocates to that. We have to be brand ambassadors to make sure that we speak India right at the right platforms. And to answer your question, credit, look, while we do venture credit, I think it's hand in glove with capital. We are capital providers at the heart of it. His problem is very different to his problem, right? How do we create structures to make sure that the scalability of the businesses are as good with our kind of capital versus equity capital? So I don't color our capital, and that's why we speak about being as an investor into companies rather than anything else.
Are investors getting right valuation at exit? Is that a concern? How is it right now?
I think it's been very good in the past 2 quarters because public markets have been hot. So if you see the last year, you're familiar to Indian public markets. If you see the last 30 listed companies, 30 to 40% have come from tech startups. That's not happened previously. If you see the IPO filings, it's more for tech startups than the regular companies. Oversubscription for what's happened with the Urban Company right now and other companies. Both of them are preparing for IPOs as well. So the point is that the public markets have been very sanguine and positive about tech startups. And that's a very good form to take exits for the investors who've been sitting long. And they have started making returns. So that's a very positive sign in the last 2-3 quarters.
Okay.
I'll add to that a little
Valuation?
bit. I think the tech companies in India are just starting to come out. So as Ishpreet put out, you actually have a great outcome looking in the last few quarters. It's brilliant because the markets are really paying well. Now, why are the markets paying well? Because let's say any company that solves the inefficiency in India through technology, the gain is disproportionately high. That's why the markets are rich. They're basically saying, I will reward you because the inefficiency you're going to solve for is so high that there is no other way to solve for it. Therefore, the markets are really solidly responding. The one way to see this, by the way, is compare this against China, where our markets are today, both in terms of the scale of the market. Our stock market is roughly about $6 trillion. You compare that to China about 25 years ago. Similar multiples, similar richness, and you would see the same level of growth over the next 20 years. The difference would be China domestically was large enough. India domestically is not as large, but what India would give you is access to global markets because Indian technologist and technology is more applicable and adoptable globally. So therefore, what you would see, India's stock market would cater to an export market also. So we actually have a unbelievable ride over the next 20 years that you just have to be like literally mindlessly just put yourself to it and just be on that treadmill and you would see great outcomes.
Interesting point you made about Indian technology and how it is more adaptable. I want to ask all of you, in fact, about how digital public infrastructure is in a way also changing the way startups design and perhaps scale new products. Would you like to start?
Yeah, without GST, UPI, Aadhaar, it was not possible for startups, I'll not just talk about Spinny, but startups like, I'll take example of maybe Jiroda, right? So until few years ago, right, people really, used to fear a lot, and mass adoption was not there for like retail investors in the public market. But you look at the situation today, it's completely different, right? So this kinds of opportunities and possibilities were not there if that like infrastructure reform was not there in place, right?
Okay.
So it is helping lots of startups to build and execute really fast at a pan-India level, right? And also building the templates for exporting to the whole world.
Okay.
Right.
Naveen, like you are building AI shopping experiences. So same question for you. How do these technologies that we have today in India make digital commerce more frictionless, more personalized?
Yeah, look, I think I think what our country has done really well is solve for digital infrastructure. And I think that calls for a huge level of foresight to be able to see that our country will ride a lot more on digital infrastructure than physical infrastructure. Of course, you need the physical infrastructure, but if you solve for digital infrastructure, you can leap. And I think we are leaping. And that's a big part of it. Our companies, for example, I run our company across the globe. The efficiency with which the payments gets done in India is by far the best. By far the best. Like those of you who travel across India, nobody carries a wallet anymore. Like if you carry a wallet, you're considered old. If you actually have an iCard on you, you're like dilapidated. If you carry a credit card, people don't know what to do with it. Nobody has seen what a money note looks like. I've not carried, like that's the level of efficiency the payment infrastructure sits in our country. Now, if you go to the US, it's decently advanced. It's pretty old, frankly, if you were to ask me. It works. It's not as efficient. So you can see that, you can see the impact of it in the companies that you build because the efficiency of our infrastructure is visible.
Okay, Ishpreet, now how should global investors watching us today engage with India's scale and innovation? Should they be co-partners? Should they be focused on structured capital perhaps? Or they should be investing in specialized platforms? What's going to be your advice?
Well, I mentioned this. Actually, it's important to understand India, right? And understanding India and different parts of India, different nuances of India. To his point today, you can technically in a fintech company, 10 people can create a 10 million user company in no time. That kind of infrastructure we're sitting in. We have funded a lot of companies on electric, the infrastructure, government policies, what's happening on ground. And today, even more because of what's happening geopolitically, right? We have to understand what are the bilateral relationships of each countries. So having a team on ground or having partners on ground is the best way to do it. Having volunteers or people who know the nuances. So we were speaking to a lot of global funds here who watching, as I said, India out of Middle East or Europe or US. And we have been only recommending that you can do so much more if you're able to partner with so many people. In case you don't want to create your teams, if you can have local partnerships, that's better to make sure that that you know the India really well. And second is us, what I spoke about. If they are not coming, why don't we go out, right? In terms of speaking and telling what India is all about. So combination of factors, I see a lot of excitement. I see a lot of curiosity of the investors trying to know how to get in various sectors, especially which has right impetus. I think it's all the matter of how do we communicate well and how do they position well.
Well, absolutely. We're completely out of time, but thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. I hope our audience here got a lot of insights about India's startup story and what it really has to offer to the entire world. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is halfway through the final day, and I think there's a level of exhaustion amongst us now. But we have a really important panel, and one that I'm very, very excited to moderate, on Inside the Battle for Strategic Power with a group of deep tech CEOs. The race for deep tech leadership is no longer just about innovation, it's about influence. With global defense spending nearing $2.7 trillion US dollars. Technologies once confined to labs are now shaping the balance of power. Solid-state batteries, quantum computing, advanced AI, autonomous systems aren't simply commercial bets, but they're strategic assets. And I'm pretty sure that all of my panel feels that every day. The CEOs that we have with us today are leading companies that sit at this intersection between frontier science into deployable systems that power economies, industries, and national capabilities. So for today, the question is, how do we create a positive and conducive ecosystem to support and grow deep tech, to support what you do, while managing the constraints that come from the fact that you are working in what is now a strategic industry? We have 4 phenomenal speakers. On my immediate left, Dr. Siyu Huang, the CEO and co-founder of Factorial Energy, which is about solid-state batteries. Next to her, Dr. Subodh Kulkarni, the president and CEO of Rigetti Computing, which is a quantum computing company. Samir Menon, the co-founder and CEO of Dexterity, which is around industrial automation and AI. And then finally, AJ Abdalat, founder and CEO of Beyond Limits, an AI company. So, Siyu, let me come to you first. In an earlier exchange we were having, you said every challenge has 2 sides. We need to spot the opportunity within the constraint. So, what are the opportunities that you see within the constraints that are created by rising geopolitical power tensions?
I would say in the U.S., battery is a very rare commodity here because right now, 90% of U.S. military and defense applications are using batteries from China. Mm-hmm. And as of 2 weeks ago, China announced this across-the-board export control ban for all of the batteries exporting outside of China, especially for high-energy density batteries over 300 watt-hour per kilogram. And this is a startling commencement of the new era of the vacuum and also competition. However, this created a very special opportunity for us because we're proud to be a leading U.S. maker and a U.S. leader in batteries. We're backed by Mercedes, Stellantis, Hyundai, and Kia, and they all have broad presence in the U.S. in automotive, but also in energy storage and various other applications. And for us, for our initial focus is really on drone and various applications, but we think this created a very unprecedented opportunity for suppliers in the U.S.
So it expands your market, but what about your supply chain?
Yeah, that's definitely very important. Like we build the resilience through localization and diversification. So supply chain is definitely a very important topic. We currently have collaborations among multiple parties, like with Korea, that we actually have 3 investors and partners. We announced a partnership with LG Chem earlier this year. And we also had a strong investment from Lotte Chemical, which is another chemical player in the space, as well as a few other like Japanese and Korean partners that really diversified upstream. And downstream, we announced a recycling partnership with Sungil High-Tech, which is a conglomerate in Korea to do recycling for the battery from cradle to
kind
grave.
of circular economy, effectively.
Yes.
Fantastic, and I'm sure we'll come back to this theme. Subodh, your business is, as I understand it, kind of is centered on quantum computing.
Correct.
Can you just say one word about what it is you do and how that is impacting, or how you think that in the future is going to impact the kind of geopolitical or the power politics?
Quantum computing is by definition of deep tech.
Yeah.
Extremely exciting, disruptive technology with tremendous ramifications. We can solve problems that have not been solved before, or we can take problems that are being solved but do them much faster. We are talking 1 million or 1 billion times faster at a fractional energy consumption. So it's got tremendous computing power, also tremendous lower energy consumption, both at the same time. But just with any complicated technology, there are both rewards and some serious concerns. Rewards, of course, you can do all these things, exciting drug development and financial forecasting, weather forecasting, all those things. But the risk is quantum computing can also easily break encryption. And that's the reason national security is at stake here.
So in the next 5 to 10 years, and timelines vary because we are doing development right now, quantum computers could break AES encryption, and that can lead to havoc, frankly. I don't think the world is ready for it. I don't think the governments are ready for it. I don't think most of us understand what it means. I mean, literally, we could wake up a day and we find everything is dark around us, and your bank is gone, your brokerage is gone, no light, no water, back to the basics, and that we call Q day. And we are literally talking 5 to 10 years from now that could happen, and I don't think many governments and many people are even fathoming that could happen. So there's some serious stakes going on right now, and it's going to be exciting to see how quantum computing comes along.
Exciting and scary. And I want to come back to this theme of what is it you want from governments, but what is the kind of pressure you're under from governments, right, as you do this innovation. But Samir, let me come to you. And by the way, I should say, I'm going to come to the audience very quickly for questions, because this is so much more fun for everybody up here, and I think for you as well, if you get to engage in the conversation. So please, if the things you want to ask about, start thinking about it, because I am going to come to you fairly quickly. But before I do, Samir, let me come to you. Dexterity's robotics platforms operate across logistics and industrial automation, as I understand. I've done my homework. As that autonomy expands into the kind of defense and security domains, what are you seeing? Are you beginning to yet see governments put in place guardrails, or what are the guardrails that you're anticipating seeing?
I would say physical AI is a broad umbrella of efforts that are related to taking AI technologies and applying them to physical systems like robots. It's a relatively new area which is developing very rapidly. When we look at the applications in front of us that are imminent, and by imminent I would say on a 5-year horizon, those applications all center around robots playing an assistive role to supercharge people, amplify our capabilities to do stressful, laborious, repetitive grunt work. I think there are longer-term applications in defense, which might come along that more hardware-focused. It's a bit early for us to say exactly how it's going to play out, but where we do see a lot of activity is that the wars of the future and the conflicts of the future are going to be dictated more by how resilient our supply chains are, by how efficient we are at creating the goods and the weapons that go out. And at the end of the day, wars are probably going to be fought by robots. So how do we become efficient at that?
One of the the kind of stories, if you will, of World War II in particular was American manufacturing companies very, very quickly changing their production lines, right, to start building planes and other defense mechanisms. Or how is that story going to change if there's a next time round? How is that story going to change with the kind of things that you're creating?
Yeah, there's two stories over here. One is, of course, how do we make ourselves way more productive and efficient than we are? The backdrop to this is when we look at most of the global powers today, they all have economies with an aging, declining population. Mm-hmm. So we're all getting older. We're having fewer kids. There's fewer people to do the work. And the kids are far more obsessed with watching YouTube and TikTok than getting their hands dirty. Yeah. So I think robotics is an inevitability. It can become the backbone of a national security initiative, and I think everyone should be invested in it. That being said, the robots aren't going to be like your Terminator, fighting with lasers. They're going to be just helping you make your economy much more resilient.
You say that, but I was reading something just this week where somebody was, and I can't remember, I think it was an American businessman who was saying that is the future of warfare, right? So possibly, maybe not, right?
You never know.
AJ, let me just come to you. We've spent a lot of time talking about AI over the last three days. What's missing in the AI race? What is it that we're not talking about?
I think we're seeing significant progress in AI. We saw significant enhancement in machine learning, deep learning in the last couple of decades, in the last 40 years in generative intelligence. I think what's important right now is really explainability and trust. Beyond Limits as a company came from the legacy of NASA. NASA will not deploy any asset in space if you cannot explain how you arrived at the answer and provide an audit trail. So that was built into the technology. And we were talking about dual use technology. We're finding out actually, when you're deploying this in the commercial arena, people, when they basically see how AI arrived at the answer and they look at the audit trail, it provides explainability, they're willing to embrace it. So it's creating a trust between workers and AI. And I truly believe, this is maybe a biased opinion, that the future of intelligence is going to be through collaboration between the human race and AI system. So it is very important to build that trust. So explainability and audit trail will be very important.
Can I, particularly for the two of you, but I welcome your thoughts as well. I mean, one of the things that I keep hearing about is that China, they are using AI to do practical things, right? They are integrating AI into industry. In the United States, it's all about AGI, right? And two totally different races going on. And that has strategic consequence. So I'd love to hear from all of you, but particularly the two of you at the end who are doing AI, which is the race that we should be running, right?
If I may, I believe AGI is obviously the holy grail, okay? We're not there yet, but I think it's coming soon, especially with development with like quantum computing. I think the advancement AI with quantum computing is going to get us there. We used to talk about AGI maybe around 2050. I actually think it's a lot sooner than that. But what's important, again, I want to emphasize, making sure that human is in the loop. And again, I apologize for being redundant. Collaboration between the human race, AI system, building explainability, creating the trust is going to be very important.
Maybe I can add something to it. I mean, there's a race going on to get to AGI, and it's harder with the current versions of LLMs that we are dealing with. So if you look at ChatGPT 5, was better than ChatGPT 4, but we couldn't justify the amount of extra development we had to do to get that incremental result. One of the interesting papers that came out a couple months ago from Google, actually, and we are replicating those results, is that with a quantum computer, fundamentally quantum computer is like a human brain. Okay, in fact, there are people who have said, nature has given us a perfect quantum computer, it's the human brain. All we are trying to do is build a machine that gets close to it. And Google demonstrated that a quantum computer plus Gen AI may be a faster path to get to AGI, and the timelines are indeed 4 or 5 years from now. So we are talking very soon, we may have a quantum computer and Gen AI that starts coming very, very close to AGI type human intelligence. Some exciting stuff going on there.
I'll take a counter position.
Yeah.
Please.
We should do the practical stuff. It's way more important.
Well, this is it. I mean, I've got 4 entrepreneurs, all based in the United States, who are, I mean, you haven't commented, but there's a lean, if you will, to the American way of looking at it. But no, fantastic.
And I agree. I think like when it comes to the future of the defense and national security, yes, you can have a lot of cloud computing and all the stuff, but you need to have someone on the ground to really execute it. Right? Yeah. And that's where coming to the drones, the airplanes, the aerospace, the marines, those are the hardwares. You need to be automated, and you need to have the physical system to deploy it.
Absolutely.
One of the other themes that has come out over many of the conversations I've participated in is the role of talent, is the role of people. And I think what I'm hearing is there's a role for technology, but not in the absence of people and trust. I want to ask one more question up here, and then I'm going to start looking. Don't get me wrong. I have more questions than I can cover in the half hour we've got, but I want to make sure you all have a voice. Are you yet, again, you're 4 businesses based in the United States. Are you yet, how is your relationship with government been changing, and how do you think it's going to change over the next, say, 5 years, over the time horizon that we've been talking? And I'd love you to answer the question both in terms of what they're asking of you, but also what you're asking of them, right?
Yeah, mostly government has been a very supportive role in the U.S. to support like those technologies that's critical for national security. But I would say I would love for them to be more collaborative to the commercial deployment. Because currently there are a lot of constraints coming to technologies when it comes to the defense applications. And that's why we've even had like big defense contract manufacturers told us, like, if you wanted to deploy something commercially, don't go to defense. That should be the last market you're tapping into. And that's why you also see a lot of US defense companies, not to talk about those like dinosaurs, right? For the big ones and the new ones coming up. And usually they're very small. They're very small in size because they're just being burdened by so much overhead you have to wear with the IT. Like I had a company, they have like 4 people just working in IT. They have 200 people in total just working on the IT security. And that's going to be a huge burden for the company to grow, even hire talents globally. So I think that's something I do wish the US government could develop a little bit more embracive culture around this and make sure like it's also good for them, right? We don't want the government to have the latest, the oldest technology, but also the latest technology as well. So I think that's going to be a mutually beneficial path, which is also the government want us to do, is to bring them the latest technology, like what we just announced with Mercedes, the record drive, 1,205 kilometer drive, and with the EV, and they wanted to have that technology. But if they can't, you have to put all the string attached to it, then they have to be the last market to receive it.
So your advice is go to defense, despite the huge amount of money that's coming into defense, leave the defense till later, because if you go early, you're going to be constrained. What else are you
That's good advice. And just to follow it up, taking the more practical position, I would say you can build a mountain one brick at a time or one rock at a time. And there's a fundamental desire to move fast in startups, which is best matched moving to the commercial economy, which also moves fast. If you have companies that are operating on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, they have a sense of urgency versus government institutions usually work on at least years. So there's many advantages to keeping that startup spark alive. With AI in particular, there are so many opportunities where you can take something into production that is maybe at a 90-95% capability, drive actual value in the world, and bootstrap the creation of a much more general technology, which is where I think companies can really scale. Defense requires much higher degree of reliability, robustness.
Okay, so
it comes later.
Yeah, it comes later because you need 100% or 99.99.
99.9 something. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think we're noticing a big shift in the US. If you look at the last like 6 decades, we saw technology development and innovation coming out of DoD through their sponsored ecosystem, universities, national labs. I actually seeing a new trend right now where startups are becoming to generate new innovation. And I'm very encouraged and finding very refreshing that actually I think the US government, for example, is adapting to that change. One example is the Army Future Command. They're set up in the University of Austin. It's like a Silicon Valley startup. They're allowing startup company to basically come up with new ideas through broad agency announcement. It's a very refreshing, it's a good step. So we're seeing startup company now come up with innovation that the government will adopt.
Okay, so it's kind of a reverse.
In quantum computing, government plays a very critical role right now because of the national security interests. And the US government, like many other governments, has a huge stake in quantum computing. Most of the funding so far has come from the government. We encourage them as much as we can because there's a race, frankly, there's a race going on between US and China right now in quantum computing. And the fear is that whoever comes up with a capable quantum computer first has a huge advantage, not for just 10 or 20 years, but probably a century or so. So stakes are fairly high. Most people right up to the president understand it. So I have personally been in many committees, subcommittees to give advice. Having said that, I mean, right now the government is shut down. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the US government and many other governments. So they need to move faster. The example I gave them is semiconductor industry developed because of one company and one government customer, Fairchild and NASA. It was awful technology, very error-prone technology in the 1950s and 60s. But the US government single-handedly nurtured semiconductor industry in its early days to become now what is a multi-trillion-dollar industry that we all use. Quantum computing is going through a similar phase right now. We need governments, not just the US government, to hold hand, take us through this current decade or so before it takes off.
So it's interesting. I'm hearing very different messaging across the panel. Kind of, I guess it depends on your industry, right? Quantum computing, high capital intensity.
Absolutely.
Kind of maybe a longer time horizon. It lends itself more to government. Whereas if you want to move fast, you have to think in a different way. Let me come to the audience. Are there any questions from the audience? As I say, I've got plenty of questions myself, but I do want the audience to have an opportunity to ask. So I'm going to go to this lady here, and then I'm going to pick up this gentleman, and I'm going to come to this gentleman. So this lady here, she's got her hand up right behind you. Perfect. If you can just say who you are, give us your name, give us your company, and then ask the question, so that it's always nice to know who we're answering. Go ahead.
Sure. My name is Ying Li with Emma Capital. I'm a venture capitalist. I'm curious to get your opinion on what are the biggest challenges or technical barriers that we need to cross before those deep tech can be, used in a wider scale for, solid-state battery, quantum, and robotics and AI.
I'll say what we find out, there is an opportunity, as I mentioned, that working as a direct contract manufacturer is very cumbersome with the US government. But if you're working as a tier 2, right, that could be an opportunity for you you don't have to carry all the overhead as you need it to be, but we can supply to drones, to submarine companies, and they can contract with the government directly. So I would say that's an opportunity we see. Definitely, it potentially can come in even before automotive and some of the energy storage application adoptions.
So in quantum computing, I mean, there are a lot of challenges right now. So one of the main challenges we as a collective industry deal with is errors that we get. So our quantum states don't stay in that state for long. We call decoherence. They come back to natural state in 50, 100 microseconds, and that's too short a time period. So the entire industry's focus is to give error-free quantum computers if we can. And we call it a quantum advantage and fault-tolerant quantum computing. So there are a couple milestones that we track in the industry. None of us are at that quantum advantage right now. That's why you don't see quantum computers in any data centers today. Today, they are not superior than CPU or GPU technology. The potential is there. That's why all the investment and everything. But we are still 3 to 5 years from that first milestone where we can demonstrate practical benefits with quantum computing. So lots of challenges, technically speaking, to get to that point right now.
So physical AI is quite interesting. I would say one of the important milestones in physical AI was just crossed within the past 18 months, at least for us, probably for a few other folks, which is robots today can actually do a better job than people at many stressful, heavy lifting applications that are the backbone of our economy. Where the key challenges have shifted today is we've started to see growth, we've started to see revenues ramp, we started to see mass deployments kick off. Large customers are adopting. Amazon recently announced that it actually has more robot employees than human employees have deployed their millionth or so robot. With physical AI, it's taking off, basically. The challenges today are being capital efficient, making sure that you're marshaling your resources. It's a massive field. I mean, digital AI is huge. Physical AI is 10 times potential larger impact. And you can very easily get distracted because there are applications in consumer, there are applications in industrials, there are applications in enterprises. So I would say the challenge is taking capital, deploying it efficiently, and keeping high focus in a way that drives extreme commercial value. And that becomes very, very challenging, collecting the right amounts of data to scale yourself. And it really comes down to, can you build general purpose AI that can serve as a robot brain, where the same robot brain drives a wide variety of different robots, where the same robot brain supports many, many different applications. Can you do that cost effectively and safely?
I think they're not technology challenges. There's actually, we're working on a lot of exciting stuff out there that are game changers for the world, addressing some of the most serious challenges. The issue, you're a VC, we need patient capital. Deep tech is not like SaaS or software. The capital needs to be patient to make sure that we can basically commercialize deep tech approaches. And I feel actually very pleasantly surprised that we were beginning to see private equity get involved in funding deep tech. So just patient capital to allow deep tech to basically address some serious problems out there.
Patient capital. This gentleman here.
Thank you. My question to
Who
Mr.
are
AG, Ayub, I work for a financial investor in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you.
My question to AJ, Ms. Wickett gave an interesting taxonomy on how the structure of the AI in the US versus in China, how China is more focused towards its application and all that. I'm keen to understand your perspective when it comes to the quantum race, USA versus China. How is this, who's leading that particular domain, if I may?
Well, I'm not a quantum guy, I'm an AI guy, but I'll give you my perspectives very quickly. What is exciting about quantum, we've talked about AGI, and I know we have basically different opinions on that. I honestly think quantum is also very near, okay? I think we're beginning to see some capabilities demonstrated in the field. It's not mature yet to the point, but it's getting there. I'm excited about the potential convergence of AI and quantum. I think this is going to be a game changer, and truly it's going to be the gateway to AGI, and it's going to be very exciting.
Okay, Subodh, come on.
So yeah,
Thank you,
we
AJ.
obviously track where China is in quantum computing the best we can. Unfortunately for us, China has become very secretive in the last 2 or 3 years when it comes to quantum computing. They hardly publish any papers or patents. They come to conferences, but they don't give any talks or anything. So we are kind of left guessing as to what exactly the status of quantum computing is in China. Chinese Academy of Sciences, where most of the work happens outside Beijing, supposedly has more than 20,000 people working on quantum computing right now. That's an order of magnitude, probably more people than what we have in the US right now. So there's a lot of concern amongst us in the US that China is at least putting a lot of resources, and they very well may be ahead. We just don't know. And that's the risk we are all taking right now, is if indeed somebody comes up with a capable quantum computer before we can to protect ourselves, and if it gets used for a negative purpose like hacking, what are we going to face? So there's some serious ramifications here.
There are so many echoes in history in what you're talking about, kind of the nuclear race, incredible echoes in that space. But there's also an echo of the alternative, which is scientists across borders talking to one another, right? And somehow that's where the innovation, if you think about COVID vaccines, right? I mean, that was a lot of exchange, even though that was a strategic instrument in many respects. So, I mean, I think there's something in history there, but it's saddening to hear that you can't have those conversations anymore.
Well,
Informally.
Except for China, I think there's open dialogue going on amongst most researchers, among most countries. So that's the good part. I mean, and that it's an interesting case study where a single monolithic entity like the government of China funding a quantum computing program versus a classic capitalistic system of many startups like Rigetti Computing, but also companies like Google and IBM, and the innovative spirit that generates, which model is going to work out. And we'll get the answer in the next 5 to 10 years. Of course, we are hoping our capitalistic model works out, but there's always a risk that the single monolithic model may be more suitable for something as big as quantum computing.
Great conversation. I'd love to keep going, but this gentleman had a question.
Thank you. My name is Asif. I work for the Ministry of Communication in Saudi. My question is to Dr. Kulkarni on the quantum. So we have seen today a different story. In some companies, even in quantum, have publicly listed, and some of them are still too early. I mean, we are hearing a mixed news, kind of. Some say we're very close, 100 qubit, 200 qubits. Others say we're still far. And kind of back to what AJ mentioned is that maybe there is no patient capital. We're just being pushed and just going through. And I have seen like the reverse SPAC and people going listed, and still there is no use cases. So I'm still curious, where are we really in terms of the quantum computer, and who is doing what? Where are we in terms of the commercialization?
I know we don't have that much time to go over all the details, but Rigetti is a public company. We are traded on NASDAQ. Our market cap is more than $12 billion right now. So we are one of those fortunate companies. We are sitting on $600 million cash, no debt. So we are one of the well-funded companies. But institutional investors have started taking positions in quantum computing companies. So even small companies, we are one of the mid-sized companies, about 200 people kind of company. But small startups are getting money from private capital, venture capital, and it's getting funding from those entities. Government is where the challenge is, as I discussed earlier. But to your question, our view, and you're right, there are various views. There are some companies that are saying quantum's already here. Then you see Jensen Huang making a comment like quantum will be in 30 years, and there's all kinds of shades of gray in between. Our view is that we are about 3 to 5 years from commercial quantum computers for practical applications in data centers. But that's not encryption kind of stuff. For that, you need a bigger, like a few thousand qubit quantum computer. We think we are about 8 to 10 years away from those kinds of applications.
With the final few minutes that we have to us, I want to ask each of you the same question, which is, and I'm going to use a 5-year time horizon, right? Because that's the one everybody seems to be. In 5 years, what is the single breakthrough in your space that you think is going to completely transform and accelerate your industry space? Is it a breakthrough in commerciality? Is it a breakthrough in policy? What is it? So briefly, because we've only got about 3 minutes.
So our space is really about solid-state battery. That's the world has been betting on.
So what is the breakthrough you anticipate?
It's about the commercialization into various industries. We'll start with the drone and some of this marine industry, and then we'll get into EV and get into the energy storage. That's the one going to transform the entire, especially from the mass market to the premium market segment. And it's not only driven by US, but also like all the top 10 OEMs in Europe and US, as well as China. That's I would say unilaterally, the vision that the world is driving to adopt this new technology.
Is the expansion into new industry spaces.
Right, like China recently announced that the last 30 years, they bet on lithium ion, and that's not right now a $300 billion industry. For the next 30 years, they wanted to bet on solid states. So that's the next $300 billion industry for them.
Thank you.
I touched on it earlier. I mean, in the next 3 to 5 years, we will get to that quantum advantage point where we can show superiority with quantum computing for practical applications. But the big one is the AGI that AJ and I both touched on. I believe that in the next 5 years, combination of quantum computing with classical computing could potentially get us to AGI, and excitement but challenges that come with it. We need to figure out how to deal with it right now.
Smith.
I would say physical AI has just kicked off. The critical point actually was crossed within the past year. So where we are today, it's time to ramp. It's time to go. We need robots all around us. There's so many people here. I hope 5 years from now this conference happens and there's a good amount of robots. Another few years after that, there's at least half of them are robots, and getting all of our job done. I need my laptop. I just send a little message on my app, goes running, gets my laptop. So I think it's time to scale, basically.
Okay, it's scaling.
Robots everywhere.
AJ.
I'm going to take a different point of view. I think the next breakthrough is not about technology. It's about the dynamics between the human race and technology. How we adapt to robots, how we adapt to AI. Truly, that's going to be the next breakthrough. How we, as a human race, can integrate, for the first time in history, we actually have another species, if you can call AI species here, that is smarter than the human race. The dynamics, the relationship, that's going to be the next breakthrough.
I hope we're able to change that fast, because our biology isn't, right?
Yes.
Thank you all. What I find interesting about this last question is, we as humans, again, talking about biology, right? The way our brains work is to think in straight lines. And what you've told us is we need to stop thinking in straight lines, because that's not the direction of travel. Will you all join me in thanking our panel for a great conversation about deep tech and strategic interests? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are ready. Good afternoon and welcome to our session titled Funds in Focus, Aramco and Wa'ed Ventures. The sky is full of funds. According to latest analysis, 18,000 private capital funds worldwide are raising an estimated $3.3 trillion. But what sets Aramco apart? That's what we are going to find out today with our guests. Joining me, two leaders who play a central role in this transformation, Mr. Raed Tawali, Executive Managing Director of Prosperity 7, and Mr. Mohammed Zishan Hassan, CIO of Wa'ed Ventures. Gentlemen, welcome. Well, first, let's start with Mr. Raed. Prosperity 7, you manage around $7 billion in capital. How does the fund decide which technologies or sectors are worth backing?
For Aramco Ventures, actually, Prosperity 7 is the diversified growth fund of Aramco Ventures. Aramco Ventures in total AUM is $7 billion between two programs. We have our strategic fund, which is more focused on sustainability and different technologies that are more strategic to Saudi Aramco. Prosperity 7 is the other diversified growth fund. Between the two programs, we are sector agnostic. So between both programs, we're investing in all the technologies that are related to oil and gas and energy and sustainability, and also into emerging technologies. So as in AI infrastructure, robotics, and even in medical sectors as well.
So for Mr. Zishan, your $500 million fund, and actually you have a clear mandate of connecting the Saudi startups with global. How do you do that?
Okay, great question. So a brief context on that. Again, Wa'ed Ventures is local VC arm of Saudi Aramco, $500 million. It's much smaller than my colleague. It's not because Aramco loves them more. It's because we are focused on local ecosystem. And related to the size of the ecosystem, I think is quite a good size. In terms of our mandate, so we at Wa'ed, we consider ourselves as enabler of the ecosystem. Right, so when we started back in 2013, we had our own loan program. So it was just limited to the loan, and then we added incubation because that was needed at a specific time. 2013 was initial age of the entrepreneurship and VC ecosystem in Saudi. Moving forward, we had VC in 2014. We added $200 million to invest in VC, to invest in all the companies that is being graduated from our incubators. Moving forward, we realized that there is a gap, especially in the late stage and mid stage. So that's why we expanded our fund to $500 million and increased the ticket size to $20 million so that we can invest in late stage and pre-IPO companies. 3 years ago, we announced our first AI fund. Actually, it's region's first AI fund, $100 million allocation for that. Now, if you see our evolution over time, our framework for deployment is very simple. We identify the gaps and invest and try to address it. And that's what we've been doing for the last 8 to 10 years now. And we have seen the result. I mean, if you see the Saudi ecosystem today, they are ranked at 23rd. 3 years ago, it was 83. So it's a 60 step up. So we believe that we are living in this environment where we have high growth in our ecosystem. We are one of the initial and important contributor to the ecosystem.
So, Mr. Raed, a venture fund that is run by private sector has a clear objective, but you are owned by Aramco, which is a government entity. So how do you balance between profit making and between achieving the vision, which can sometimes actually contradict?
Yeah, I see. Actually, for Saudi Aramco, as you mentioned, maybe VC is more known to be kind of a private sector play. But for Aramco,
it's high risk also.
And it is, yes. Actually, for the beginning of the venture in Aramco, actually it grew from 2012. It was just $500 million. Aramco established its R&D center at the beginning of the year 2000. And actually, the VC fund was created as to more of a supplementary and inorganic growth for different technologies. So we started with a $500 million or $500 million fund at the time. It enabled us to access into different technologies that complemented our R&Ds, and so a lot of those technologies actually were deployed in Aramco and scaled. Now from there, as you build that platform, you build that access, we expanded from there into creating more funds, and we're reaching today at 7 billion. We were able to actually tap into, of course, access different technologies, get that strategic value, and the financial, which allowed us even to expand and continue on that success into investing in different emerging technologies. At that time, it was sort of, okay, it can be exploring different frontiers. But later on, a lot of those actually technologies were actually good options for Aramco, being it from a financial return, which is also strategic, and also actually to complement a lot of Aramco even adjacent businesses as well. And we're seeing a lot of those as well being strategic options for the kingdom as well. So a lot of our portfolio companies actually today, now they're not only working with Aramco, they're working with Aramco, the wider ecosystem of Aramco, government entities like in PIF, a lot actually are working closely with Humane and will be actually an integral part of Humane in the future. Not also limited to that, even with the private sector in Saudi Arabia as well.
Mr. Zishan, what are the challenges of trying to localize startups in Saudi Arabia? Because that's your aim, that's your objective, right?
Yes. So localization is one of our mandate, which is quite recent. Like we started doing it 3-4 years ago. However, we always our core focus is still the Saudi. And when we say focus is Saudi, means whatever we do, it is for the benefit of the ecosystem. And one of the part is of course localization. And we are very selective in our localization mandate. We bring the companies to Saudi only which can add value to the ecosystem. We see the gaps. So companies, these are more into infrastructure, enabling
You don't
technology.
find any resistance in doing this?
Well, 4 years ago, yes, not now. So 4 years ago, when we started this mandate, so it was very hard, really. We needed to do some convincing work for the founders to sell Saudi Arabia. Now, actually, it's the other way around. We don't feel like any companies, actually now you're seeing, and you've been seeing this for the last couple of days in FII, like the opportunity is in Saudi. So we can find it very easy for the founders. In fact, this is the first thing we discuss about any company we meet with, especially global companies. Localization is the core for our deployment. And we discussed various criteria that we always discuss. What can we do in Saudi? How you gonna, it's not just a sales office. There's certain criteria. It has to be used as a fund, hiring local talent, having R&D. And that is in writing. There is a commitment from the companies. Well, challenges may come from the founder's perspective, which is related to access to talent, for example. And again, I mean, 4 years ago when we started, we were the only one talking about localization. Now we have a whole ecosystem around that. You'll find some private sector companies like Astrolab and others who are helping companies to find them company registration, location, bank account, etc. And we have government entities like MISA. MISA have their own PSAP program where we are exclusive partner to them. So we work together to localize those companies. And the challenges like access to talent or regulatory restrictions or issues and deployment, I mean, this is very much in all the ecosystems. We work together with universities to have access to first-hand talent, especially, I'll give you an example, the quantum computer company, Pascal, that we invested a couple of years ago, we localized them, and we just get them hired through KFPM.
This is a French company?
French company, that's right,
think
Pascal.
it was the Nobel Peace Prize.
That's right, Nobel Peace Prize, the
no.
founders, yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, so 2 weeks ago, the first quantum computer of the region just landed in Tehran. I'm not saying quantum access is the computer, the machine itself is sitting in Aramco. So these are kind of impact, these are kind of, problem that we have seen, learned over the period and trying to solve them.
Okay. Mr. Raed, also, how do you engage with the international venture ecosystem, Silicon Valley, Asia, and Europe? How do you engage with them, if you engage at all?
Well, we are an international investor. Actually, Aramco Ventures and P7, our investment teams are located in Palo Alto, Silicon Valley, New York. In China, on the other side of the hemisphere, we also have 2 investment teams in Beijing and Shanghai. And even in Europe as well. And all of our investments are actually in international companies. So currently we have around 170 portfolio companies in different sectors that we work closely with them. Not only with our portfolio companies, it's actually we're our co-investors. So, of course, a lot of our investments, as we play a good role into adding value to our portfolio companies, along with our co-investors. We co-invest with the most known VCs. We can call them the first tier VCs. And we always collaborate with all of them. We never found ourselves kind of competing with anyone, but more of it's of collaborating. Of course, this was very helpful in managing our portfolio and get our portfolio companies through their milestones, through these challenges, and so on. And also in raising funds as well for them.
So, Mr. Zishan, I'm a founder and I'm seeking funding from WAD. What would you want me to demonstrate to you besides a good idea?
Well, I think it depends on what stage you are, right? It's just an idea. So we have 3 different verticals. I mean, if you have a seed stage fund, you can invest up to $500,000. That's where the idea have some value. But besides that, we also want to see the founder's his background as well. Now, if you're sitting in Silicon Valley, it's very easy to say, yes, we have 2 or 3 times founder. Here in this ecosystem, you don't find that. So it's not easy to get that. But again, we see the execution capability, and that comes from the background of the founder. We always do some reference with our founders. The ecosystem is small, really, so we can always get feedback from other founders, other investors. So this is for the early stage. Again, it's much easier if you move forward to mid and late stage, where you can really see some numbers, more quantitative evaluation of the company. You see the performance is good, the traction is good, the technology makes sense. And of course, the market, the most important in both sides. So market is something that we look in common in, either it's a small company, early stage, or the late stage company.
Mr. Wright, the future of Prosperity 7, if I'm going to meet you again after, let's say, in 2030, where would you be? Still 7 billion or maybe more?
It's not about the size of the fund. It's more of the impact. And we're very proud, since we established Prosperity 7 in 2020, we're proud of our portfolio. A lot of the companies that we invested in, be it in AI, in robotics, beside the financial gains we're getting, they're actually, a lot of them are playing a very important role in a lot of the AI applications or what the consumer see. But behind that, a lot of our portfolio companies are playing a very important part. I need to name a few of them on the Silicon Valley side. For example, Together AI, Grok, it's one of our portfolio companies. And we heard a lot of announcements about Grok, even Leap previously. Also in Silicon Medicine, AJ was sitting here Beyond Limits, just in the panel before us. It was also one of our portfolio companies. So we're planning to continue on that success. And we're even more expanding regionally into other areas like in India. We're going to expand even further into Europe, into different sectors as well. What allows us to do that is the team that we have. Not only the Saudi team, also our regional teams. A lot of them comes from these VC ecosystems. They're experts in what they do. We have a very great business development team in Dhahran, can support also their companies. And also, what really differentiates us, we are a patient capital. I'm hearing a lot during FII, everybody's talking about patient capital. And a lot of those technologies into deep tech, it really requires the patient capital. We're very lucky that we have Aramco as our single LP, where they actually allow us to do that.
We have 50 seconds, and I want to ask Mr. Zishan to give me one example, one startup from your portfolio, which best symbolizes the Saudi innovation story.
So I would say, I mean, I'll give you 2 examples.
In 30 seconds.
30 seconds, right. So first of all, we'll talk about the localization, the impact that we're trying to create through bringing those companies like Pascal. I'll just give an example of Pascal, the quantum computing. We invested in Terradrone, a Japanese company. So they're not just helping Aramco in their operations, but also these drones are being used to deliver medicines during Hajj. So these are the impact that we have made by investing in global companies. When it comes to local ecosystem, I think, so 3-4 years ago, there were not AI companies, but again, we were one of the earliest investor in AI. 2017, we invested in a company called Hezen.ai. There is a made in Saudi AI camera that is being deployed across 8 countries, including Silicon Valley. So we are very proud of that. You will not hear that we are exporting AI technologies, especially in the US and Silicon Valley.
Thank you so much. Our time is up. Thank you, Mr. Raitwali from Prosperity 7 and Mr. Mohammed Zishan from WAD. And thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you.